How do we control coronavirus now? Here's Michael, a delivery driver.
All day, every day, I'm seeing people. Last thing I want to do is give anyone coronavirus. So the first sign of a cough, soon as my temperature rises, any loss of taste or smell, I'm staying in, booking a test, only going out to get it done. I mean, you want to know straight away, right? That's how we protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
And fastest isn't necessarily the best. So the availability of a vaccine will take a while to figure out what people really want to take. Long term, we want a vaccine that provides durable immunity and ultimately prevents what's called forward transmission, which is how contagious someone is if they do get infected.
Meantime, you've got so many different companies racing to a potential finish line here. What is the value of a pharmaceutical horse race?
There's a lot of value because we don't really know which vaccine will be best. There's a lot of uncharted territory with this virus. So this unprecedented effort and the diversity of approaches is really welcome because everyone is learning very quickly about the virus, and by having a diversity of vaccines, I think we have the best opportunity to effective viruses.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are moving lower along with S&P futures as investors weigh prospects for the economy to recover during the pandemic. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures, they're down about 2 points. Dow futures down 44. NASDAQ futures up 14. The DAX in Germany is down 0.6%. 10-year Treasury down 2/30 seconds. The yield 0.64%, and the yield on the 2-year is 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.25% or 10 cents at $40.52 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.2% or $3.70 at $18.1360 an ounce. The euro 1.1273 against the dollar. British pound 1.2531, and the yen's at 107.54. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, hospitals are being pushed to the brink fighting the coronavirus outbreak. A new model from the University of Washington warns 200,000 Americans could die from coronavirus before Christmas. It comes as President Trump is launching an all-out effort to open schools in the fall. We're learning that Chief Justice John Roberts was hospitalized last month for an injury he suffered to his forehead after falling while walking for exercise. Supreme Court spokeswoman Kathy Arberg says Roberts' doctors believe the fall was due to lightheadedness caused by dehydration and have ruled out a seizure. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It is 6:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and as we continue to track the surge in coronavirus cases in the Sun Belt, we welcome back Andy Peckosh, professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Obviously, this surge in places like Florida, California, and Texas has been a concern for quite some time, Dr. Peckosh, although we have seen a few days straight where the increase in infections has been below the previous 7-day average. What does that tell you about how this pandemic is spreading at this point?
Well, right now in many places across the South, the number of cases that we have are simply too high to be able to control with most of our standard measures. I think implementing more stringent measures for the short term is probably going to be a necessary option to get those cases down even lower. Plateauing of cases is a great thing to see, but I would also remind everybody that we see the hospitalizations and the deaths on a delay after we see the total cases, because it takes so much time to see those more severe effects of the infection. So that's a good trend to see, but but I am a little bit worried about what's going to happen over the next week or two in terms of some of the more severe cases.
All right. When you talk about more stringent restrictions, what are you pointing to specifically? Because we've had a number of cities, particularly in South Florida, that have been dialing back their reopenings, closing indoor dining in restaurants, putting beaches on hold. What more needs to be done?
Well, all of those things need to be done at a very efficient manner. It needs to be widespread. And I think the general public also needs to really be reminded to take their personal social distancing, mask wearing much more seriously. Many countries around the world and many states here in the U.S. have been able to not just flatten the curve, but pin it down at a low level using this approach of dropping the number of cases based on large-scale public health interventions, and then keeping in place those individual social distancing measures and mask wearing so that the case number never really creeps up to a level that's really stressing our medical institutions. So this is something that we can do this. It just has to be done efficiently at the local level.
It's interesting that we've noticed over the last month or so that the issue of social distancing and wearing masks has become increasingly politicized. How concerned are you about that in terms of getting this infection under control?
No, I mean, it's incredibly concerning because everything starts at the individual level. Making sure that you're physically distancing, wearing face masks, putting in multiple things that are keeping you protected from spreading the disease to others or obtaining the disease is really critical. And it's clear from the data that wearing a mask, keeping that 6-foot distance from people, avoiding areas that have large crowds, those are simple things that when done effectively by individuals drastically limit the spread of this virus, and we need more of that to be happening right now.
Is there a risk that the idea of a mask mandate could backfire because the issue has become so politicized? And how do you get around that if that is an issue?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's no doubt that there's a little bit of fatigue when it comes to this because this is a disease that takes a long time to work through the systems, as I mentioned before. It takes up to a week before people can show symptoms. It takes another week or so before they develop severe symptoms, and then the hospitalizations and the deaths come up a little bit after that. So it takes a while for public health interventions to really make an impact on all of these ways that we monitor infections. All I can say is that there are examples out there of people of countries who have done this, pinned levels down to a level, case numbers down to a low level, and then been able to sort of open up the economy and restore some semblance of normalcy to people's lives. But we're not at a level in many places across the south of the U.S. Where we can do that.
Now, the U.S. is planning to ramp up testing specifically in Louisiana, Texas, and Florida. Will that kind of focused testing be enough to give us an idea of how this virus is developing?
It's good to make sure that you're putting the resources in the right places and trying to fine-tune these public health interventions to the quote-unquote hotspots of infection that are occurring. So that's a good thing. But testing has to be combined with contact tracing to make sure that you can limit these cases and limit the spread of the virus. So, again, there's no one panacea to this pandemic. It's a combination of different public health interventions that'll help us effectively identify cases, limit spread, and then keep these numbers of cases down to a reasonable level.
It's always so helpful getting your insights, Professor. Thanks, as always, for being with us this morning. Professor Andy Pekos is an expert on molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And as always, get the very latest on the pandemic at Bloomberg.com/coronavirus or VRUSGO. Just type in that function on your Bloomberg terminal. S&P futures lower by 3 points right now. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The nation's largest movie theater chain is close to a restructuring deal to help the company avoid bankruptcy, according to the Wall Street Journal. AMC reported a loss of more than $2 billion in the first quarter of 2020, even before all of its theaters were closed because of the pandemic. In addition to lockdowns, theater chains have been hurt by studio decisions to release many major movies online through streaming services. The owner of Ann Taylor and Lane Bryant is preparing to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and close at least 1,200 of its almost 3,000 stores in the U.S. Ascena Retail has seen years of financial losses amid the online shopping boom and a slowdown in mall traffic. Yesterday on Wall Street, things slowed down. The rally fizzled out. The Dow was down almost 400 points. The S&P fell 34. The Nasdaq was down 90. This morning, stock futures are narrowly mixed. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Hey y'all, Jeff Fox.
The big Volkswagen event is now on. If you're after an approved used Volkswagen, for a limited time, you can buy one with 2 years warranty, 2 years MOT cover, 2 years roadside assistance, and 2 services all included at 8.9% APR representative. Hello, sir. Do any take your fancy?
I need to sit down.
The big Volkswagen event. With every type of car on offer, you may have trouble choosing. With Solutions Personal Contract Plan until 12th of July. At participating retailers on used Volkswagens aged between 90 days and 60 months only. Indemnities may be required. Warranty valid for vehicles up to 100,000 miles at activation. MOT cover is up to 2 years and is underwritten by UK General Insurance Limited. Volkswagen Finance. Contact your local retailer.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Short on time? Don't worry. You can still get your cook on with Asda. Get 3 Asda ready meals for just £5.50. Like our beef lasagna or our tomato and mozzarella panette bake. Hang up your oven gloves. We've got dinner covered. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Meals 400 grams, £2.10 each.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and we're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. S&P futures are lower this morning as we see daily coronavirus infections across the country slow a bit. Yesterday saw cases rise by the same rate as last week, though increases in the South remain stronger. Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber is frustrated by his state's response.
I sort of feel like everybody's become the mayor in Jaws, where, it's fine, the water's fine, just go on and swim. And that's not healthy right now because people need to know the challenge so they know what to do about it.
Florida's positive test rate jumped above 16%. That's the highest level on record. In Texas, new cases hit 10,000 for the first time. And Arizona recorded the most deaths since the outbreak began. Kate Gallego is the mayor of Phoenix.
It has been so hard to see the numbers skyrocket and know that if we'd done things like not allow crowded nightclubs, we could have saved lives.
For the fourth straight day, new infections in the U.S. topped 50,000. That has the federal government ramping up testing in Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. Officials will open 8 new testing sites to get a firmer grasp on how the pandemic is evolving.
Meantime, the administration's frustration with the World Health Organization and its handling of the virus is coming to a head. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the very latest. John, good morning.
And Karen, the White House has given notice to the UN that it plans to exit the WHO. President Trump has said the organization shows undue deference to China. Critics say the move is aimed at distracting voters from his failure to control the virus. Among those opposed to the move is the head of the Senate Health Committee, Republican Lamar Alexander. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. And the White House is also taking aim at Hong Kong. Sources tell us advisors want to undermine the Hong Kong dollar's peg to the U.S. dollar, but traders are doubtful the threat will materialize. We get more from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis.
One trader called it a wacky idea, one that has been spectacularly unsuccessful in the past, and the Hong Kong dollar has been steady all day at the strong end of its trading range. The idea is that breaking the peg would punish China for imposing a national security law on Hong Kong. But it wouldn't be easy, and there are several reasons why the market is yawning at the idea. Hong Kong has nearly $500 billion of reserves, and there's something like $5 trillion US deposited in Hong Kong banks. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. And S&P futures again lower, down about 3 points this morning. Dow futures down 48. NASDAQ futures up 13. The 10-year Treasury down 2/32, yield 0.64%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thanks. It is 6:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Michael?
Thank you very much, Nathan. Long Island enters Phase 4 of reopening today from the coronavirus lockdown. It means more tourist attractions can open, including museums and aquariums. Malls will remain closed. Nassau County Executive Laura Curran says that 15% to 25% of the county's positive test results over the past 3 weeks are people from out of state. New Jersey's virus transmission rate rose again to 1.05. According to Governor Phil Murphy's office, it is the highest in about 10 weeks. The rate was 1.03 on Monday, the first time since mid-March it had a rate where each case is causing at least one other new infection. President Donald Trump is pressing state and local officials to reopen schools this fall, arguing that some are keeping schools closed for political reasons.
It's very important. It's very important for our country. It's very important for the well-being of the student and the parents. So we're going to be putting a lot of pressure on open your schools in the fall.
The White House's roundtable gathered health and education leaders from across the nation who said schools and colleges are ready to open in the fall, and they can do so safely. They argued students need access to meal programs and mental health behavioral health services. San Francisco Mayor London Breed has announced a new pause in reopening. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
The reopening of dine-in restaurants has been widely anticipated in the city that likes to laud its culinary expertise.
On July 13, we will not be able to allow restaurants to operate indoors as we had planned, nor will we be able to allow bars to open outdoors.
Breed says they will continually analyze the numbers, though. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
President Trump's niece, Mary Trump, offers a scathing portrayal of her uncle in a new book. Trump's estranged niece paints a portrait of a man trained in deception with a distant and dysfunctional father. She also accuses the president of cheating on his SATs. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany rejected the book's claims.
It's ridiculous, absurd allegations that have absolute no bearing in truth. Have yet to see the book, but it is a book of falsehoods.
Other members of the Trump family had attempted to prevent the book's publication, citing a non-disclosure agreement she signed during a dispute over her grandfather's will. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. Almost 6:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Burton Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Here again, John Stashower.
All right, Nathan. Yesterday, a day of sports figures criticized for statements and messages. Deshaun Jackson of the Philadelphia Eagles made anti-Semitic posts, later said they were taken the wrong way, but former NBA player Steven Jackson, no relation, supported him. Longtime umpire Joe West claimed that coronavirus death totals are inaccurate. And Kelly Loeffler, who owns the WNBA team in Atlanta, is against players having Black Lives Matter on their uniforms. She wants the American flag. The Players Association wants her removed from the league. The San Francisco Giants, latest baseball team to have to halt workouts because they haven't gotten back COVID tests. Baseball now seeking an additional medical lab to speed up results. The one they're using now, the tests have to go to Utah. While some baseball players have chosen not to play this shortened season, Mets slugger Pete Alonso hardly among them.
I'm so amped up and I'm so excited to play. And I know that not only us and the organization is excited to play, but I know that there's a ton of people around the country, around the world that are excited to have baseball back. And it's awesome.
Mets and Yankees are going to play exhibition games July 18th and 19th, and it's been learned that next season, on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, there'll be a Met-Yankee game at Citi Field. The Nets' Spencer Dinwiddie was having an all-star caliber season, averaging 21 points a game, but he has the virus, and he won't be part of the NBA restart. The third Net to opt out. The Ryder Cup has been postponed until 2021. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. Now to some other stories we're following. Facebook has wrapped up its meeting with civil rights organizations. The meeting with members of the NAACP, the Anti-Defamation League, and Color of Change did not go well. One group called it nothing more than a PR exercise. Alex Webb covers Facebook for Bloomberg Opinion.
Mark Zuckerberg, following his usual playbook, basically just hunkers down and hopes that it all blows over. It's overlooking the hugely detrimental effect that they have to the social fabric, with a lot of the posts that go on without any sort of moderation and can be destructive to people's mental state.
The group say Facebook executives would not commit to a timeline to remove disinformation and hate speech from the social network. The president of Color of Change calls the meeting a disappointment. As the coronavirus pandemic hits the U.S. economy hard, Federal Reserve Vice Chair Richard Clarida says the central bank will do more if needed, and we get that story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Clarida said the central bank will likely turn to additional forward guidance and asset purchases if it needs to do more to support the U.S. economic recovery. Speaking on CNN International, Clarida said we have a lot of accommodation in place. There is more that we can do. There is more that we will do if we need to. In terms of extra tools, he cited, quote, additional forms of forward guidance that the Fed has used in the past and we would consider using in the future, as well as noting current Fed purchases of treasuries and mortgages to support market functioning. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. Coming up today on the economic front, we get data on consumer credit at 3 p.m. Wall Street time. Economists predict a drop for the third month in a row. Here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
The report tracks a variety of sectors, from auto loans to credit cards and student loans, and has traced a familiar path. In April, consumer credit dropped by a historic $68.8 billion, the largest decline in data going back to 1943, as Americans sheltered at home and businesses shut down. That's even with households shifting to e-commerce to purchase necessities. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Vinny, thank you. As the pandemic hits consumer spending, the owner of Mall Brands, occupying almost 3,000 stores, is planning a bankruptcy filing. Bloomberg News has learned that Ascena Retail Group will close at least 1,200 locations. Ascena owns brands like Ann Taylor and Lane Bryant. Lenders, including Eaton Vance, would take control of the company. The parent of mortgage giant Quicken Loans has filed for an IPO. Rocket Company says it's made a profit the last 3 years and describes itself as the largest retail mortgage lender in the U.S. Rocket was founded by billionaire Dan Gilbert. And many Americans plan to spend less than before the pandemic. More than 40% of adults tell a survey from creditcards.com they plan to cut back on discretionary spending. A decrease could threaten to slow the economic recovery from COVID-19. Futures mixed at the moment. Little change to S&P futures. Dow futures are down 21 points. NASDAQ futures are higher by 22. DAX in Germany down 0.6%. The CAC in Paris is lower by 0.9%. 10-year Treasury down 2/30 seconds. The yield just shy of 0.65%. The 2-year yield is at 0.15%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is a blue.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this rainy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not get road ready with a free car check worth £15 at all our stores and garages? With 25,000 weekly slots available at 700 locations, you can count on us to get you safely back on the road. Or even back beside the seaside. From MOTs to tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Give yourself a Diet Coke break.
You always say the best thing you ever did was join up. I bet you don't get the same experiences in Civvy Street. Remember those amazing deployments we had? And that feeling of pride. We'd love to have you back. Go on. Feel the pride again. Search RAF Rejoiners.
This is the home that stays in together, so Flora's things clean in this rainy weather.
That disinfects doorknobs, floors, baked bean cans.
Fills rooms with fragrance, does meetings in gin jams.
This is a home that cares with pride.
Shares smiles and waves with those either side.
Because this is your London, not inside alone.
But all house proud together, one big beautiful home.
So Flora, killing germs beautifully since 1922.
News and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Nearing 3 million coronavirus cases in the U.S. as infections continue to soar in Arizona. Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallegos pleading for assistance from the federal government.
I've been asking FEMA to come in and do a testing surge. The Health and Human Services Department is doing one in Baton Rouge. I've invited them to Phoenix. We need a federal partner.
Mary Trump, a niece of President Donald Trump, offers a scathing portrayal of her uncle in a new book set to be published next week.
Mary Trump includes a number of embarrassing anecdotes from the president. It's clear that there is bad blood in this family. It goes back decades. One of these anecdotes is actually when Donald Trump was younger. He wanted to get into the University of Pennsylvania, and she says he paid another kid to take the SATs for him. The White House says that is absurd. They say it's false, and they're questioning why this book is coming out now.
Correspondent Sarah Murray also reports in the book Mary Trump describes her uncle as a compulsive liar. I'm John Trout.
Pandemic information is coming at you so quickly, it's hard to react, never mind plan.
How bad do you think it's going to get?
How much more cutting do you need to do?
Here's help. Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures, they're little changed while European stocks slide amid new tensions between Washington and Beijing and worries that consumer spending will lag during the pandemic. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures, they're little changed. Dow futures down 18, NASDAQ futures up 24. The DAX in Germany's down 0.5%. 10-year Treasury down 3/32, yield 0.64%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.2% or 8 cents at $40.53 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.3% or $5.70 at $18.15.90 an ounce. The euro 1.1279 against the dollar. British pound 1.2536, and the yen is at 107.57. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, for the fourth straight day, U.S. COVID-19 infections topped 50,000. It comes as states and localities will determine how best to reopen schools in August or September. That was the topic at a White House roundtable discussion the president held to push for getting back to classroom learning. President Trump's point man to North Korea says the U.S. administration is ready to resume stalled nuclear negotiations, despite the North's repeated claims that it has no immediate intent for dialogue with Washington. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Stephen Biegun spoke to reporters following meetings with South Korean officials. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, where it is 6:48 on Wall Street. Time now to check what's going on in D.C. Some of the top stories in the nation's capital. President Trump will host Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador today to tout the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement and hold a working dinner. Chief Justice John Roberts was in the hospital last month for a fall. Just learned about that. And the U.S. has given the United Nations 1 year's notice it is leaving the World Health Organization in the middle of the pandemic. Also making news, President Trump's stance on Confederate symbols and race. may be coming at a political cost. Let's get more on that from Bloomberg U.S. Politics editor Kathleen Hunter. And Kate, of course, this is something we've talked about for the last few days, and the White House has continued to face questions about the president's rhetoric. What has the White House been saying?
Well, I think the calculation that the Trump campaign essentially has made here is that they're going to be able to essentially juice support among their supporters in battleground states enough to encourage people to get to the polls in November and give them the margins that they need in these kind of key states to recreate the victory that they had in 2016. Whether that's going to be successful or not, I think is a very open question, given the changing attitudes among Americans about these sorts of issues. Everything from, Confederate statues, Confederate symbols, to Americans' views about police and how they treat people of different races, particularly black people in America. All of those, the polls show that the American public's views on those issues have shifted rather dramatically since 2016. And so I think it's a very open question whether or not this strategy is going to work or whether it'll backfire.
Is it showing an erosion in the polls for the president when it comes to other issues like handling of the economy, handling of the coronavirus pandemic? Is this having a corrosive effect more broadly?
Well, I think that's the issue, really, is that, if Trump was able to talk really in a convincing way about the status of the U.S. economy the way he was back in January and February before the coronavirus hit, then he'd be out there talking about that. I think the issue is that, the U.S. economy is certainly, in dire straits compared to how, the campaign anticipated it would be. And so, of course, a lot is left to be seen about where the economy stands on Election Day. But as it stands right now, the big issues on Americans' mind tend to be the economy and the response to the coronavirus, or the coronavirus in general. And the polling indicates that on both fronts, particularly on the response to the coronavirus, Americans are concerned, and particularly when it comes to the virus response, they're very critical of Trump and how he's handled it. And so I think in a lot of ways, this is what Trump's talking about, because he can't talk about those other big issues because they don't benefit him right now.
So are you thinking that's an indication that the Trump campaign has almost thrown the idea of campaigning on the idea of an economic recovery out the window at this point? But given that the president is focusing so much and so hard now on some of these racially divisive issues?
Well, I don't think they've abandoned it completely. I mean, we did see Trump holding a press conference last Friday when the jobs numbers came out, and although the numbers were pretty mixed, they were not as bad in some aspects as people had predicted. And so, I think that when there are opportunities to highlight better than expected economic recovery indicators, the Trump campaign and the White House are certainly going to not miss a beat in doing that. But I think that it's a less convincing message for sure, with unemployment as high as it is, and the talk about a very deep potentially recession or depression on the horizon. It becomes a lot more difficult to craft that narrative. And so I think they're certainly pivoting to this other strategy and leaning much harder into it than we might have seen otherwise.
Well, you got to wonder whether the president might seize an opportunity to talk about the economy and trade specifically when he welcomes Mexico's president this afternoon to talk about the USMCA deal.
Absolutely, and I think this is going to be a very interesting meeting to watch. This is López Obrador, the Mexican president's first overseas trip since taking office in late 2018, so, in almost 2 years, a year and a half that he's been in office. And, if you haven't seen them, I think it's worth looking up the pictures of him flying coach from Mexico City to Washington, D.C. yesterday. It certainly, was a strange image to see, but I think particularly now what's going to be interesting to watch as he meets with the president at the White House today is, what, if any, reassurances they give to each other on the strength of the U.S.-Mexico trade relationship. Because I think that while there's obviously been tensions between the U.S. and Mexico on issues like immigration, both sides feel it particularly important right now to shore up the strength of their trade relationship.
Yeah, AMLO was in the emergency row. I don't want to read anything into that, but we'll have to leave it there. Bloomberg U.S. Politics Editor Kathleen Hunter, thank you as always. Karen.
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 6:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report with John Tucker. John, good morning.
Yeah, hi, Karen. New York City has entered phase 3 of the reopening process, but businesses like 305 Fitness, they remain closed. We spoke with the owner, Sadie Kurzban, back in April, the first time around, when the dance cardio studio was closed, and she joins us again now as her doors do remain shut more than 3 months later. Sadie, do you have any clarity yet on when you can reopen?
We fall into the gym category, and we don't know when we can reopen at this point. It definitely makes decisions like layoffs, furloughing, rehiring, all of those decisions really complicated right now.
Now, you have been able to pivot. Can you tell us how you've pivoted and whether or not that is an adequate revenue stream for you?
We moved our classes online. We did make them free because we thought at the time that it was the right thing to do with 40 million Americans unemployed, and I still believe that it's the right thing to do to have access to wellness and mental health and physical health in that way and to keep people indoors. We right now continue to have some revenue from members that have kept their memberships going really just out of grace and out of courtesy to us as a studio, but no, overall we have about 2% of the revenue that we were forecasted to have in 2020. So it's definitely been a very hard year as a small business, and it definitely makes it even more challenging that we don't have a clear opening date in mind right now.
In the meantime, there's the overhead, I guess rent and insurance and other forms of overhead. How are you coping with that?
So we're definitely losing money every month, which just stinks. We are working with our landlords for rent abatement and hopefully for long-term rent concessions, just given the kind of economy we'll be seeing when we return and given the uncertainty and how much money we invested in these spaces to renovate them in the first place. But yes, all of that stuff, insurance, healthcare, the employees that are remaining on payroll, it really just continues to just go out of our bank account. There's no other way to say it. It just stinks.
Well, Sadie, thanks a lot. Sadie Kurzban, owner of 305 Fitness in Manhattan. Hope for the best. And here on Bloomberg Radio, we're going to continue to bring you stories of small businesses trying to adapt during the pandemic every day at this time. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Small Business Report. Karen.
All right, John, thank you. 6:56 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report, brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology. Ranked in the top 2% nationally for alumni mid-career earnings and number 1 for student upward economic mobility. Learn more at njit.edu. Now, here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. NASA has added more safety fixes for Boeing's space capsule before it can fly astronauts. The move follows a pair of close calls during last year's test flight. In closing out the 7-month investigation, NASA said it identified 80 corrective actions, mostly involving software and testing that must be done before the Starliner capsule launches again. The previous count was 61. Boeing will repeat the flight later this year before attempting to launch astronauts next spring. Digital advertising platforms run by Google, Amazon, and other tech companies will funnel at least $25 million this year to websites spreading misinformation about COVID-19. That's according to a study by a research group called the Global Disinformation Index. It says Google's platforms will provide $19 million, or 3 out of every $4 that the misinformation sites get in ad revenue. The estimates were part of a study that analyzed ads running between January and June on 480 English language websites identified as publishers of virus misinformation. And finally, a meeting between Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg and civil rights organizations did not go well. The group said Facebook is not serious about their demands to crack down on hate speech and disinformation. They've organized a boycott to advertisers to pressure the company, and Facebook says it has spent billions of dollars to police its service. That's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report, and Bloomberg surveillance is straight ahead. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations from
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this rainy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
What we're seeing at the moment is the sugar high. It doesn't really tell us anything about what the medium-term trajectory for economies is.
A lot of the data is nonsense. We know that large swathes of the price data are simply being made up. I mean, literally made up.
It's got to be the real economy that performs. Otherwise, none of these companies are going to be able to make it through to 2021.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
From New York City for our audience worldwide, good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance with equity futures choppy overnight. We're live on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Abramowitz. I'm Jonathan Farrow. Tom Keene, in 30 minutes' time, we'll hear from the British Chancellor. And this is significant. Whether you are inside or outside of the UK, it will display a continued commitment by fiscal authorities to support this economy. And importantly, Tom, offer you a subtle hint of the shift in policy as we go from shutdown to reopen.
There's no question about that, John. And what's really important here is moving from the United Kingdom over to the United States, presumed to be August and into September. What I noticed, John, is the music cues for Bloomberg Surveillance. You start talking and the market goes from red to green. I mean, we just flipped green on equities, NASDAQ 100 stronger. But the backdrop of this, John, and this goes to this stimulus impulse that we're seeing right now, is gold doesn't go up. Gold spikes today out to 1814 the ounce.
A little bit of nervousness creeping into this market, Lisa Abramowitz. Gold through 1,800 very briefly. The reopening rotation has stalled. The steepness in the yield curve coming into June, that has faded. Lisa, a little bit of nervousness starting to build in the last several weeks, the past month.
And we're seeing that in the mobility data, the sort of soft data that people are increasingly look at to gauge economic activity in the United States. If you look at the key July 4th weekend, typically a time when everybody drives around, it was weaker than expected, and this is leading to some skittishness around oil in particular. Coming up today, I'm very curious to see what we see in terms of crude oil inventories in the U.S. The EIA report comes out at 10:30 a.m. Also, what I'm watching, 1 p.m., U.S. 10-year notes getting auctioned off, $29 billion of them, and this follows a 3-year auction yesterday with a yield at a record low for the United States for borrowing for 3 years of 0.19%. And then this evening, President Trump will be hosting a dinner with Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who's flying reportedly coach with a layover to get to Washington, D.C. to talk about the USMCA, which is about to be launched. Very interesting, though, and this is very much on the forefront, John, and that is the cooperation between the nations on how to combat the coronavirus, which is spreading in both countries and is not necessarily isolated to one territory.
And I understand Mr. Trudeau will not be there, which is interesting considering we're talking about USMCA. A little bit later this morning, we'll catch up with Kevin Cerulli down in Washington on that very topic. In this market right now, as Tom indicated, we do turn positive by 3 points on the S&P 500, up by 0.1%. For the broader market, though, if you strip out the muscle of big tech in America and just look at the equal-weighted S&P 500, that's equal weighting the individual constituencies of the S&P, you see an equity market that is down almost 10% over the last month. Quite clearly, this market is listening, watching to this reopening stumble in America. We start the conversation this morning on Bloomberg Surveillance with Tony Crescenzi of PIMCO. Tony, talk to us about that nervousness that's just slowly starting to creep into this market more broadly.
Well, when one looks at the NASDAQ, there does seem to be a rays of hope out in the marketplace. And let me refer you the 3 books real fast, going back 250 years to tell us about the state of markets. They both speak to the idea of liquidity, of course, supplied by the central banks, and confidence. Frank Knight, 99 years ago, wrote a book about risk, profit, and uncertainty. He spoke to the idea of radical uncertainty versus ordinary uncertainty. Radical uncertainty hit markets in March. Currently, perhaps the recent nervousness reflects a ordinary level of uncertainty. We still don't know what the future holds with respect to the virus, but it doesn't feel as radical at the moment. Walter Bagot, 150 years ago in Lombard Street, spoke to the idea of liquidity. We know that story quite well. There's plenty of it. And finally, the confidence angle, this comes from just from us human beings. Adam Smith, 250 years ago, The Wealth of Nations, said people would wake up every day wanting to make more income, more profits, and in doing so, it would build the wealth of nations, people going out there trying to be happy and enjoy themselves and better their lives and their families. So this is what's driving markets, and these are typical drivers of markets. The key, though, is the uncertainty element and the degree to which it dissipates. Right now, one could say markets are in a bit of a holding pattern, given the surge of virus cases in the United States. But the lack of surge elsewhere is probably what's keeping it from being worse.
Tony, your thoughts on confidence, if you can. Do you see confidence, consumer, business confidence, starting to fade here as the reopening stalls in many states across America?
To some extent, but when we look throughout history, and of course the terrible situation in 1917-18, the aftermath, once the virus passed, people went about their daily lives. Wars, far worse scenarios in many cases, in many nations. We see rebounds in the aftermath there as well. So many cases throughout history where human beings have gone about their business once the uncertainties and anxiety-related sources went away. And one shouldn't expect this to change. And think about the future. One could say it's somewhat hopeful, especially if one thinks about the technology sector. The NASDAQ, you mentioned, Jonathan, the equity markets haven't fared well of late, but the NASDAQ has held up. There is this idea of 5G technology, and who knows, maybe there'll be productivity bursts from companies realizing they could do things better, having experienced the crisis recently.
You know, I'll take John's observation there about how the equal weight S&P 500 is doing versus 10 glory stocks. Tony, one of the most important moments for the year for me was with John Farrow at Davos with Bob Prince, and he talked about a lethargy, a damping of everything in the financial system because we're at the zero bound. Okay, we're at the zero bound, and I'm certainly observing a lethargy in the U.S. bond market. Are we becoming Japan-like and having a lethargy here because of the changes that we've seen in bills, notes, and bonds?
Central banks have crossed the Rubicon, as the Bank of Japan did many years ago. Monetary policy, to some extent, is a new fiscal policy. And in Japan, it's called MFFP, Monetary Finance Fiscal Policy. In other words, government borrows money and the central bank buys the bonds to gain that funding. It's an alchemy of monetary policy. What it does is stave off what I call, and this is from a book I wrote, not to tout it, the Keynesian endpoint. Nations such as Greece, for example, learned that almost 10 years ago, that it could not borrow from markets in the way that Japan and the U.S. and the rest of Europe is. It reached the Keynesian endpoint. It seems that investors are saying, again, it's okay to print money to buy the bonds that governments need to issue, that they'll be able to stave off this Keynesian endpoint for longer. But when will it hit the fan? Many could say that perhaps it already has. The indebtedness in nations prevents spending of the sort that would provide for growth in the long run. Currently, there's a lot of money being distributed to individuals, and it's absolutely necessary. But the benefit to the economy will not be long lasting. A broadband system, a new tunnel to Manhattan, things like that would provide long-lasting benefits to the economy, and the indebtedness prevents that sort of investment.
So the Keynesian endpoint, another way of saying that is, when does debt matter? And your answer is it already has dampened productivity. There also has been a question about just the volume of debt securities in the system. Correct. And how violently things can reprice. We're not seeing that right now with a stasis, as Tom was talking about, in bond yields. When do we start to see the next violent repricing at a time when the Fed is really dampening that volatility in a major way?
It's a really good point to bring up. The idea that, and think about this, 2008, 2022, chaotic endings to credit economic cycles. It may become the norm, these chaotic endings, because of the existence of large amounts of debt securities. The financial system can't handle the amount of debt securities that must pass through it from time to time when selling erupts. And so the selling will erupt again someday for some reason, and the system will have to try and handle it, but it's finding it difficult to do so, in part because regulators have told the intermediaries, don't hold all that many securities, don't hold as many as you used to, we don't want you to. And nor do these investment banks want to. They've changed the business models. And so think about the final note. Corporate bond issuance this year in the United States, investment grade, $1.2 trillion, double last year. That's lots more debt securities. U.S. Treasury issuance, massive. Who will buy those securities when investors want to sell? And so the odds are that there will be chaotic endings to cycles in the future when they end. And so investors should always leave dry powder for those periods to gain alpha in their portfolios.
Tony, always great to catch up with you, sir. I hope you and the team at PIMCO are doing well. That's Tony Crescenzi there of PIMCO on this bond market and the fiscal effort. And Lisa, looking at the fiscal effort right now, let's take the United Kingdom. We are having a discussion about judgments on the future. Let's have an observation about the present. In about 30 minutes' time, the Chancellor of the Exchequer will talk about doing more. The 10-year gilt yield at the moment, 16 basis points. Doing more, 0.16% is your yield on a 10-year maturity.
Yeah, if you actually take a look at 30-year yields in the United Kingdom, they've come in beyond where Japan's 30-year yields were. They did briefly. The sense of the real Japanification in the UK, which raises a question, John, and I think this is implicit in your comment, why not borrow more? Why not spend more? Because basically investors are handing them free money, and I think that's the dilemma. And to Tony's point, when does debt matter? Yes, it matters with productivity, but what's the alternative at this point to spending?
And demand for duration fairly resilient, Tom, as well. We had a 30-year JGB auction yesterday over in Japan. Went quite nicely. This debt is still getting away okay, even when all of the fiscal authorities around the world are still pushing to do a whole lot more.
Yeah, there's no question about it that the financial system's in operation. And again, we see gold out 18.15 and the ounce breaking out to new highs just as we speak. But John, I'll tell you, I'm fascinated by the difference between how they do fiscal stimulus in your country versus my country.
We'll hear from the Chancellor in around about 20 minutes' time. We'll bring you some of those comments right here on Bloomberg TV and radio. From New York City this morning, good morning. A little bit later, Ibrahim Rakbari of Citi, a conversation on this FX market you do not want to miss. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. The Trump administration is vowing to continue its push for schools across the country to reopen. The White House and President Trump have been touting success at controlling the death rate from the virus in the U.S., but White House Coronavirus Task Force member Dr. Anthony Fauci says death rates aren't necessarily the most important litmus test for determining the effects of the pandemic.
It's a false narrative to take comfort in a lower rate of death. There's so many other things that are very dangerous and bad about this virus. Don't get yourself into false complacency.
Researchers at the University of Houston say they have helped design a catch-and-kill air filter that can destroy COVID-19. Zifeng Ren, director of the Texas Center for Superconductivity at UH, collaborated with a Houston medical real estate firm and other researchers to design the filter. He says it uses a metal filter heated high enough to kill the airborne virus.
Preferably 200 degrees C, so that we can kill them quickly, not give them any chance to survive or going through the filter.
We're learning Chief Justice John Roberts was hospitalized about 2 weeks ago for an injury he suffered to his forehead after falling while walking for exercise. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Influential conversation.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Listening has always taught us a lot at Honda. And lately, we've been listening to your thumbs. Because thumbs can do everything now. The world is at their thumb tips. So now, the My Honda Plus app lets the thumb take control of your car too. Even when you're not inside the new Honda E, your thumb can find where you parked, set the temperature before you get in, check how much the battery is charged, and schedule charging for when electricity is cheapest. The new Honda E and My Honda Plus app. Oh, a thumbs up. Honda, the power of dreams.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Steph. She's a bus driver.
Now that people are using public transport again, we really need to make sure that we keep each other safe. Passengers need to stay 2 meters apart. If that's not possible, make it at least 1 meter. I want to see everyone wearing face coverings over their mouth and nose unless you've got a good reason not to. And when you get to where you're going, you need to wash your hands. We've still got to play our part.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
People are getting nervous again. Business leaders are getting worried. Consumers are getting worried. And there's a real sense that this might go on longer than we had hoped.
Raphael Bostic there, Atlanta Fed president, not alone, sounding some cautious words yesterday alongside Federal Reserve colleagues from New York City this morning. Today, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Brabis, I'm Jonathan Ferro. In your equity market, we build on some of the gains of the last hour, advancing around about 0.1%. A mild move higher after a choppy session overnight, up around about 5 points on the S&P. In the bond market, Treasury yields breaking lower in yesterday's session, up a single basis point today to around about 0.65%. And I'll make it quick and snappy for you, Tom. In G10 in foreign exchange, the US dollar in this mix, the euro advancing not even 0.1%. Sterling going nowhere, 12 minutes away from hearing from the Chancellor.
I'm quite taken, John, by the resiliency that we're seeing in DXY today with a 96, almost up to a 97 at one point. I just, once again, we got a little bit, I don't want to oversell it, folks, but we got a little bit of safe haven tone out there, even with green on the screen in futures.
I am placing an order to buy euro at 112.791. So order placed to buy euro at 112,791.
Which is the one that matters on this pandemic?
There are a few, and it sort of depends on what issue you're following. But I think the thing to always look out for is the overall trajectory of the virus, and then having good metrics for seeing that. And I think the most important thing to keep in mind is how long it takes for data to turn into trends, how much data can lag, and then how easy it is to take any bit of information that sort of confirms your priors or your hopes and focus on that as opposed to taking a longer, broader view. I think the example that stands out for me is that people have been really focused on the sort of downturn in the trajectory of death rates in the United States, indicating that that's some reason for, diminished worry going forward, when really it really very much is a lagging indicator, one that's already ticking up in hotspot states, and just shows that this is the same virus we've dealt with the whole time, just facing different conditions, and you have to kind of adjust for that whenever you're looking at the data.
Max, when we talk about the data, we're also talking about the renewed federal push for a boost in testing to gauge just how widespread the virus is in the hot spots in the Sun Belt. And yet, the more testing that the United States does, the longer it has been taking to process these tests and get the results back. If anyone goes to their local city MD or whatever you have, and they get that test, it might take 5 days, 6 days. By that time, once you get the results back, it's almost useless, Max. I mean, how big of a policy concern is this?
Oh, it's enormous, and it speaks again to the lag in the data we're seeing, that, anything you're seeing now, even on cases, which is one of the more, real-time pieces of data, even that lags substantially, and it lags much more when there's an acute outbreak. In order to contain the virus, you have to know who has it. People have to know so they can change their behavior. If they're waiting a week for a test, they may just make the natural assumption, unless they're, heavily symptomatic, well, I'm okay. And that's how you get, really broad and concerning community transmission. And especially as we hope over time to return to reopening more broadly, that's when you really have to get a quicker turnaround on tests so people can actually be informed and responsible.
Max, we're told this is about the science, but the approach around the world seems to be different still. It's July, and yet what we see in the United States is different to what we see in Australia, Beijing, where we've had localized shutdowns. Why is the approach so different still, even though everyone's still talking about the same science?
It comes down to the extent to which you listen to that science and the recommendations of public health experts. If different people were setting national policy in the United States and they were listening to their health experts, we would have policy that was closer to Australia, to China, and would have from the start. I think that's really what it comes down to, because the science generally has a consensus.
Max, this is really important, these statements you're making. I'm going to try to keep the politics out of it as well. There's a sheriff out there, I can't remember the details, folks, but he's just screaming no masks. And just in the last 24 hours, he's turned around to a mask. What would happen to all of this news flow if the president showed up at an event with a mask on? How would that actually change the dialogue or the science, as you put it, Max?
I'd hope it would change it substantially, because this is the thing on which there should probably be the least amount of disagreement. Just wearing a mask when you're in a congregate setting, especially inside. It's just such a small step, and one that data has grown to support more strongly over time as people have had these sort of natural experiments in Germany and in the United States that have provided pretty convincing evidence that on a large scale, masking does work to push the virus. And it's in line with, I think, everyone's priority, which is, getting back to normal, having the most open economy you can through what will still be a significant wait until a vaccine.
And yet, Max, we have to accept that authorities are...
Position opened on euro at 112,791. So I'm long on euro at 112.791.
Max, cover your face. What happened, Max? How did we all get it so wrong several months ago?
Yeah, no, that was one of the really big errors in health communication from the very start. And I think you can the evidence was a little bit less concrete, and there was a genuine concern about mask shortage. And if you looked at areas that were having more success in containing it, it did give an early indication, and the fact that this was droplet based. That was the principal method of transmission, that masks would have been useful. It's something I wish we got right, but, that's how science works. People update based on evidence, and that's what should inform policy, and it's what should form behavior rather than, fighting about what happened a few months ago. That did happen. It was a mistake, but it's one that, since we've rectified in communication, and we should use, the data we have, the evidence we have to hopefully convince people that this is something that needs to be a part of daily life for some time to come if you want what we all want, which is to be able to get back to normal life.
Max, appreciate your input. We all want that for sure. Max Neeson there, Bloomberg opinion columnist. Tom, it did happen a few months ago, but quite clearly it's a messaging problem that we're still trying to recover from, not just in America, but elsewhere too.
Well, yeah, it's elsewhere, too. And of course, we see that with the serious infection of the president of Brazil as well. But, John, Tony Crescenzi was going on in the history there on Adam Smith and such. There is a whole heritage in this nation of anti-intellectualism and anti-science that we're living right now.
That's not unique to America, Tom. I can tell you that. That's shared worldwide over the last decade or so. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Equity futures unchanged. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is a Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
As shops open up again, how do we all stay safe? Fontaine runs a craft store.
We've made the shop COVID safe. If you can't keep 2 metres apart, make sure it's 1 metre with extra precautions. Know the number of customers allowed in at any one time. Use the hand sanitizer at the entrance and use contactless payments. I'm loving serving customers again, but please, to keep us open, we've all got to keep to the guidelines.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
We've got a choppy session this Wednesday morning. Good morning to you all. This is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide, live on Bloomberg TV and radio, alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Bravitz. I'm Jonathan Ferro. In your equity market, we stall out a little bit, unchanged on the S&P. Positive just a single point on the S&P 500. For those of you on the China equity market watch, the CSI 300 stringing together a 7th straight day of gains. Outside of equities, outside of the bond market, look at the gold market today. Briefly through 1,800 on gold. Right now, we're 1,801, and we advance 0.4%. And Tom Keene, as we wait for the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak in the United Kingdom, to address Parliament, sterling totally unchanged going into this. Cable 125.42.
I'm glad you mentioned it, John. We got 8 ways to go here with our next guest. Ibrahim Rabari's been with us many times with Citigroup and head of economic research for them, working with Catherine Mann and working with a great team, including Edward Morse on petroleum and hydrocarbons. Ibrahim, let me just talk about a greater idea of stimulus in endless debt, even at a low interest rate. Does that just assume currency depreciation or potential devaluation?
Tom and John, it's great to be on once again, and that's a great question. And my short answer is no, it does not. And in fact, that's the point we've been making for our currency forecast, that in many cases, it's the ability to stabilize the economy through these very aggressive stimulus measures that in fact will pull in capital inflows and will be a support for asset prices and therefore also the exchange rate. So I don't think it's generally true that we should assume currency depreciation as a result of these massive liquidity injections. That being said, I think the aggressive actions by the Fed have certainly been one major factor that has made investors more confident to bet on currencies other than the dollar. So I think in the dollar-specific case, they've certainly contributed to the recent sell-off.
On a weighting of the mathematics of this lift in gold, up 25%, folks, off the March lows. Ibrahim Rabari, when you look at gold, do you ascribe it simply to these uncommon low real yields, these literally negative real yields across the entire system? Is that what's driving gold higher?
I think it's certainly a very important factor. And if you look at the charts, you see that the correlation with real yields, and in particular with U.S. real yields, continues to be very strong. And even most recently, if we look at the last few weeks, the latest increase in gold prices has been coming alongside a pretty steep decline in real yields as well. But we do think that there is a second element, which is, if you like, the quantitative part. So you have the price driver, which is on the real interest rate side, but it's a quantitative driver, which is, in fact, again, the massive increase in central bank liquidity. And it is associated with this search for alternatives to the conventional currency. So we think there's kind of this two-pronged pillars of support for gold prices. Very low.
Placing stop on profit for euro at 112.81.1. So stop on profit on price 112.81.1.
probably not a whole lot of Brexit noise momentum, if you want to call it that. And that may give you this window of sterling normalization. We think of it really more as kind of a bit of a summer window and then renewed downside later this year. But for the time being, it looks like sterling may have found its bottom.
Chancellor Sunak addressing the House of Commons right now, saying we will do all we can to give everyone a chance at getting a job. If you want to follow that address, you can do it live go on the Bloomberg terminal. We'll continue to bring you some of the headlines. The total plan to protect jobs and businesses is worth 160 billion sterling. These are huge numbers, Ibrahim, and they're going to get bigger in the months to come. I think a worry that most people share is that some of the effort over the last several months has done a fantastic job at offsetting the shocks to income. Will we continue to see that collective will to offset the shocks to income through to 2021, or will we transition away from that too quickly and open up an air pocket of consumer demand later this summer? Is that a fear you have, not just for the UK, not just for Europe, but perhaps here in the United States as well?
I think it's certainly a concern, and I would say it's probably my secondary concern. My first sort of concern is that some of these measures just turn out to be insufficiently effective. So in a way, it's more in the direction of we're not doing enough, not because we're doing less over time, but because even more stimulus would have been required over time. But that being said, there's clearly room for policy mistakes. And I think, again, that scope is probably most evident in the U.S., where, we have an expectation but no certainty that phase 4 stimulus will come along. But I think in the UK, too, there are these question marks. And there's a question that you alluded to earlier on, which is how do we transition over time as we're reopening parts of the economy? Are we able to pivot towards something that actually leads us into self-reliant growth as opposed to just making sure that not more jobs are lost in the short term?
Ibrahim Rabari of Citi, fantastic to catch up with you, sir. What we're seeing play out in the UK right now is just a flavour, an example of what we'll see play out here in the United States in the months to come and worldwide, as fiscal authorities have to continue to underline their commitment to do more to help this economy. We'll bring you more of the headlines from the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK as he addresses the House of Commons on what's next. This is Bloomberg.
Not be the last action. It is merely the next in our fight to recover and rebuild after coronavirus. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the detail.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. European soccer clubs expect to lose 4 billion euros or $4.5 billion in revenue over the next year because of the coronavirus pandemic. That's according to a study released by the European Club Association. The ECA estimated clubs in 55 countries face a collective shortfall of $1.8 billion this season and $2.7 billion in the 2020-2021 campaign. Organizers of the 2022 World Cup have become the latest Qatari state entity to cut jobs. The World Cup Organizing Committee did not directly cite the financial impact of the coronavirus pandemic, but officials recently spoke of concerns about the looming global recession. Qatar Airways, a FIFA sponsor, also announced job cuts recently in response to COVID-19 halting travel and shutting sports events. And that's a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Global News 20.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without?
Yes.
With?
No.
Without. With. Without. Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors. The new Honda E with wing cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
This is the home that stays in together.
So Flora's things clean in this cloudy weather.
That disinfects doorknobs, floors, baked bean cans.
Fills rooms with fragrance, does meetings in gin jams.
This is a home that cares with pride.
Shares smiles and waves with those either side.
Because this is your London, not inside alone.
But all house proud together, one big beautiful home.
So Flora, killing germs beautifully since 1922.
We're seeing demand for refined product come back in a very good way, very aggressive way. As that demand curve continues to increase, as people begin to get out and about, as the economies continue to open, we're going to see these guys do just fine.
The U.S. Energy Secretary there on the situation in this economy as we struggle to reopen and normalise, not just in the United States, but worldwide. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keane and Lisa Bravitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro. In your equity market, we bounced back up around about 8 points on the S&P 500, up about 0.25%, following some comments coming from the Chancellor in the UK on the next fiscal steps. And Tom, this is critical. It's all about the evolution of policy. As you go from shutdown to reopen, you go from insulating the economy to stimulating the economy, and you have to try and incentivize the return to work. That is exactly what the United States is going to try and do in the next month, with the administration very much at the centre of that effort. This is what we're hearing from the UK at the moment. They are going to offer a £1,000 bonus per employee for firms bringing staff back. The total retention bonus plan could be £9 billion sterling, Tom. So quite clearly what we're trying to do here is not just offset the shock to income, but also incentivize the return to work. And this is important because it's not just a conversation for the UK, it's what we're about to see play out here in America over the next several weeks.
There's no question about that, and particularly if you take out in America, John, hospitality and such, it's going to be interesting to see how you go from furlough to layoff or from layoff to a job. I mean, it's just going to be an exceptional dynamics, but the key dynamic, folks, is the process in the United Kingdom where the majority government is extremely different than what Kevin Cirilli's going to report on down in Washington. Right now, we want to look at oil. We want to look at hydrocarbons, and one of the great truisms of oil and commodities is you have to hedge your risk along the way. Rebecca Babbins is with CIBC Private Wealth Management. She has a really interesting career with Goldman Sachs, with PIMCO, and now with CIBC of hedging out in hydrocarbons. Rebecca, thank you for joining us. I'm absolutely fascinated at your view and with your experience. If you feel like the oil and gas business is so dead and is never going to come back, doom and gloom and all that, where it's almost worth not hedging. Is that true?
So I don't think that's true, and I'll challenge at least the first premise that the industry itself is dead and gone. I think we saw Warren Buffett make a pretty substantial investment in midstream and oil and gas earlier this week, which unfortunately was somewhat overshadowed by some of the headlines out of the Dakota Access Pipeline blockage. But you still need to actively hedge your commodity exposure if you're investing in energy equities. And you still need to be very, very cautious about how you pick your securities, because there continues to be a bifurcation in the sector of who's going to survive and who's not. There's no doubt the group and the sector is in the middle of a transformation, and things, it would be completely ignorant to not acknowledge that things are clearly changing. However, that does not mean the group, the sector, does not still present significant and compelling opportunities, and always you want to hedge where you can opportunistically across that opportunity set. Rebecca, I want to get into some of those opportunities and the weeding out of the weaker players from the strong within the shale patch and beyond. But before we do that, we really have to paint the picture and where we are in the supply-demand dynamic. This idea, you are seeing an unprecedented decline in shale output in the United States. You're seeing those output cuts being implemented across the Middle East this month. And yet you also see a sudden decline in demand with gasoline demand lower than people had expected over the key July 4th weekend. Where are we in this balance right now?
Yeah, that's a really great point. So I would say where we are in that balance is the first things you mentioned, which is the fact that demand came back off the lows more quickly than people feared, and we've had supply cuts and OPEC Plus start to really comply with all of their restrictions. That's pretty much priced in and known to the market. What is more uncertain is the second point you made in regards to where we go from here, and that driving data you referenced over the weekend was not spectacular, especially at the peak of summer driving season. I'd also note another data point that came out of United Airlines last night. They walked back some of the flight increases they had said they would put in place for August, saying that they saw lack of demand, particularly in COVID-related states. And thirdly, COVID-related states, California, Texas, and Florida, are the top 3 gas consumption states in the United States, making up over 25% of gas consumption. So as we see cases rise in those states, we might start to see this data that has been fueling the rally to 40-ish in WTI, 43 in Brent start to fade a little bit.
All right, so if this data is a harbinger of what's to come with respect to gasoline demand, how low could you see crude go at this point? And what would that mean in terms of the bankruptcies in the shale patch?
Yeah, so I think the difference between now and maybe the sell-off that we saw in April is the market's much more prepared for maybe some of this data to slow down. And we have, OPEC Plus now all working and singing from the same song sheet. So I don't think you see the type of volatility we saw in April. We could see something trend back to the 30s and in WTI and maybe mid-30s in Brent. However, that does have a significant impact on bankruptcies. I think you will see a larger percentage of companies start to file if we fall into that category across the shale.
I'm moving up my stop on profit for euro to 112.84.1.
The UK right now is the UK lay down a marker for fiscal authorities worldwide as policy has to shift, evolve as we try and reopen these economies and get people back to work. The Chancellor announcing just moments ago a retention bonus plan, basically incentivizing firms to bring employees back. The other issue as well, Tom, as you look at the labour market, is a particular demographic that is going to be hard hit in the months and maybe even years to come. The younger demographic who will find it hard to get experience and get an entry-level job. Something else the UK are looking at doing is a kickstart program to pay firms to hire young people. And I emphasize, Tom, I do think this is a marker for fiscal authorities elsewhere to see how they follow up here as some of these ideas come to the surface as we move forward.
Well, like so many things in this crisis, John, this is something that was there before the pandemic, and the pandemic has just massively accentuated it. I've been talking about this for years, John, about, look at me. Nobody's ever going to retire. I mean, John, you're going to carry me out of here in the surveillance casket. I mean, that's the way it is, and it's tough. It's really tough for young kids. Every household watching and listening knows that.
Hey, Tom. Bit dark, but I will say it would be an honour to carry on working with you through to your John, old age, and much longer too.
And what's great about it, John, is it's Tottenham blue. It's just fabulous, the color that they got.
I thought it was Tottenham white, and Tottenham blue is the away shirt. Tom will talk about this later. From New York City this morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, For the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone. Happy birthday! From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Are you ready to play?
This summer, ITV Hub is fully loaded with loads more full series.
Gonna get messy.
Yeah, like it's fuller than ever. From Love Island to Layer, we have divas lined up back to back.
Fill me in, sister.
From the GC and the Ibiza Weekender reps to the Real Housewives, it's round full of lots and lots of...
This is getting too much now.
Laughs, tears and smiles. It's crammed full with full series like Quiz, Flesh and Blood, Harry's Heroes and Manx in Mumbai. We've grown, expanded and just gone a bit extra this summer.
Give me some on.
ITV Hub fully loaded this summer.
The best experience possible.
Did we mention it's looking fuller than ever?
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
We've got some of your faves waiting for you on Just Eat. KFC, Burger King and Subway. Spend as much or as little as you like. No minimum spend here. We'll always deliver like a G. I mean, I would know. I'm pretty G myself, thank you very much.
Somebody say, just eat.
T's and C's apply. Selected stores and locations.
I always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
What we're seeing at the moment is the sugar high. It doesn't really tell us anything about what the medium-term trajectory for economies is.
A lot of the data is nonsense. We know that large swathes of the price data are simply being made up. I mean, literally made up.
It's got to be the real economy that performs. Otherwise, none of these companies are going to be able to make it through to 2021.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene. Thrilled you're with us. This simulcast on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. A most interesting day. It started out boring earlier this morning. It is not boring anymore. A market's a mess this morning. John will do a data check here better than I will. But right now, green on the screen with the NASDAQ 100 up a good 0.5%, really putting it on over the last 30 minutes, even 40 minutes. And John, I'm going to say that the Chancellor of the Exchequer, or the eggshells, whichever it is, the Chancellor giving a speech right now in the United Kingdom really talks about the stimulus to come. And John, that has been the underpinning to a good feeling about this market.
Tom, this is smart policy that we're seeing from the UK, and I think it's important because it sets a marker, lays down a marker for fiscal authorities elsewhere as well. Let's start with the labour market and what the Chancellor is doing today. The Chancellor is incentivising companies to rehire, bring back workers, offering a bonus per employee for every employee these companies bring back. Point one. Point two, they're really trying to help the young, the youth, the companies that are going to rehire these people will want to be incentivized as well. How do you incentivize them? You offer them some money to help hire young people. That's an important step as well. So that's the labour market, Tom. Now we've got to talk about the industries that are getting really beaten up. Restaurants, hospitality, tourism. The Chancellor essentially announcing a tax cut, some tax relief for those particular industries as well. And Tom, this is what we're likely to see in the coming weeks and months outside of the UK as well. Looking to make this fiscal transition as you go from insulating the economy to stimulating it. And the smart policy is to look at the specific areas of this economy you need to stimulate. Point one, rehiring, and point two, the industries that are struggling to normalise. And at the epicenter of that, hospitality and tourism.
And what's fascinating about this, folks, is the process is different in each nation, not just the United States, but every single nation is different from the apparent smoothness that we see in the United Kingdom. Lisa, this goes to the 10-year auction you mentioned earlier that we'll see, I believe, today. And again, the financial system, Lisa Abramowitz, in the United States appears to be running smoothly as we await the next trillion or $1.5 trillion of stimulus.
Running smoothly, another way of saying that yields are at rock bottoms, meaning it's never been cheaper for these governments to borrow money, so why not do it? Raising an existential question of when does debt matter? We've been talking about that throughout the program, but I think that the issue here, as John was talking about very much, is how these are targeted, these programs, and we talked a lot about the enhanced unemployment benefits set to run out at the end of this month, the $600 benefit per individual in addition to the normal unemployment benefits that have enhanced abilities to spend. How much is that going to be the emphasis versus encouraging people to get rehired as the United Kingdom is trying to do, Tom?
Well, it's a lot to talk about today, and part of our good conversation and good with markets elevated. I do want to mention gold out to record highs, $18.15 the ounce at one point on the GC1 that you can find on the Bloomberg. Right now, the perfect guest at the perfect time, Jim Bianco joins us with Bianco Research. He writes an exceptionally eclectic note, filtering in economics, finance, and investment with a great LinkedIn presence as well. Jim Bianco, thank you so much for being with us today. I want you to talk about the confidence you have that these markets, and particularly this equity market, can run as it's been running given the assumption of stimulus. Is that a given?
I think it is a given. I think that that's exactly what's been driving this market. If you look at the virus data, if you look at the stalling of the V recovery, you could really make the case that the economy is plateauing, if not rolling over. But then you throw into the mix that you've got central bank stimulus, promises of bailouts. Look what happened in the UK today. Promises of tax cuts and incentives to hire people. And all that gets washed away. And these markets continue to power higher. That begs the question, what changes this? The only thing that I think changes this is if we were to get an inflation fear and or higher interest rates. As long as rates stay low, governments and central banks can continue this extraordinary action and markets will respond positively.
Jim, I agree with you that monetary policy has exacerbated the trend in valuations, but I think it would be slightly disingenuous of me to say the equity market has not picked up on the stumble in America. If you neutralize the muscle of big tech in America and look at the equal weight S&P 500, Jim, we're down about 10% over the last month. The market is picking up on this a bit, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it is. I mean, this is not the late 90s bull market of technology where everything is just going to the moon. You're right. There is the FANG stocks plus maybe Tesla and Square and a couple of other names that are really powering higher. But the rest of the market has recovered, well over two-thirds of the previous decline that we had in February and March, and it seems to be holding it up. And that is really the number one thing that's going on. So yeah, looking beyond this, it's not it's not all just wonderful news, but it is still the big story that's pushing this market higher.
And Jim, it's the big story that's pushing the best companies that have a chance of surviving higher. However, others are filing for bankruptcy at an increasing pace. The latest, Brooks Brothers just filing for Chapter 11 is crossing the Bloomberg terminal right now. At what point does the cascade of bankruptcies become a systemic risk, affecting even some of the higher-rated companies that have enjoyed record low borrowing costs, as well as Fed and government support?
I think when the general level of interest rates goes up, when interest rates go up, that is the bond market sending a signal that they're going to reject all of the borrowing and they're afraid that there is inflation. Now, we don't have that right now, so that doesn't seem to be an issue. But on the inflation front, let me offer you one anecdote. Yesterday, Shake Shack reported a 49% same-store sales decline, broken down by a 60% decline in their traffic and an 11% increase in their prices. Now, that's just one example, but you keep repeating that example long enough, and we might, in fact, get that inflation fear that everybody seems to be talking about, and that would show up with the bond market and higher yields, and that would end the game and everything. But again, I'll emphasize that's not happening right now.
Hey, Jim, I love catching up with you, but the line is a little bit flaky, so we're going to have to let you go. Jim Bianco of Bianco Research there. We'll try and get Jim back on the show very, very soon. On this show right now, we are focused on the next fiscal steps worldwide, and we're getting a flavour of how the change will develop in the coming months from the United Kingdom. The Chancellor, Tom, just wrapping up his address to the House of Commons. What we've seen is incentivising rehiring and offering some tax relief, some targeted tax relief to the industries that will struggle to normalise in the months and maybe year to come.
Yeah, there's no question about it, John. I mean, I'm going to go into, John, the idea that we'll see nothing like this out of Washington. Because it's an election year as well, it will be a Donnybrook to see what they do. I would really look for Secretary Mnuchin, the somewhat equivalent to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I would look for Secretary Mnuchin to really be front and center in this process, driving it forward, given, again, an election year.
There is one point, though, Tom, that I think this administration may well be very well aligned with what the UK is doing this morning, and that is incentivising rehiring. Lisa, from speaking to the administration, there is a reluctance to carry over, extend the enhanced unemployment benefits, but there is a consensus on the need to incentivise rehiring, and I just wonder whether some of the ideas this morning from the UK resonate with fiscal policymakers elsewhere.
The thing I'm struggling with, John, is you have on one hand this idea of how you financially encourage companies to rehire individuals. On the other side, you have the virus, which continues, right? I mean, if people don't want to go to restaurants because they're scared of getting sick, they're not going to go to restaurants even if they have vouchers to do so, and it's half price from Monday to Wednesday in the United Kingdom. And this is sort of the big conundrum here, right?
We close position on euro at 112.84.1. And we got £500 profit.
To really craft an appropriate program around, John.
Well, Lisa, this is why it underlines the need for continued fiscal support. And Tom, ahead of the election that you quite rightly mentioned in November, that is why this administration will have to continue to step up and step in and help various industries still support the shocks to incomes across this nation. Best case, Tom, even amongst the bulls, their best case on unemployment year end is something around 9%. And as you've said repeatedly, 9% unemployment in America, not good enough.
And John, this is really important. I'm so glad you brought this up. The most important number of the week is tomorrow at 8:30, where we really need to see what claims do. This is high-frequency data, and that, will it directly involve the fiscal debate? No, but everyone will be paying attention to how those forecasts change, and they're not going to change off the monthly jobs report. They're going to change off the high-frequency data.
And Tom, what the claims data will speak to, Lisa, is the huge amount of churn that Ellen Zentner of Morgan Stanley last week was addressing. If you look at the net change in jobs, sure, the last couple of months has been positive. Beneath the surface, though, the amount of jobs coming off, the permanent job losses, the claims that are still elevated week after week after week, this is an economy that will still need support.
It's devastating to see the churn, because what that means is that people are moving from just laying off workers in an emergency setting and taking a look at their business and saying it's going to be smaller going forward. I think about the airline industry in particular, John, which has just been trying to accumulate as much cash as they can to survive. But you've seen bankruptcies absolutely surge in this industry, with distressed debt abounding within the airlines. And I do wonder what the world will look like on the other side of this, John.
Smart fiscal policy is going to be crucial, critical, and we got a little flavour of that this morning from the United Kingdom and the British Chancellor. In your equity market right now, around about 1 hour and 19 minutes away from the opening bell, equity futures are slightly elevated, up 5 on the S&P 500. We advance 0.2%. Alongside Tom Keane, together with Lisa Bravis, I'm Jonathan Ferro. Heard on Bloomberg Radio, seen on Bloomberg TV. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. President Trump is publicly clashing with his top infectious disease specialist, Dr. Anthony Fauci, about the coronavirus pandemic. Bloomberg's Martin DeCaro reports.
After Dr. Fauci warned against falling for what he called a false narrative of a falling death rate, President Trump rebuked him, saying the U.S. is controlling the virus in an interview with Gray Television.
I think we are in a good place. I disagree with him. You know, Dr. Fauci said don't wear masks, and now he says wear them.
Falling rate or not, hundreds of Americans are dying every day from COVID, and Dr. Fauci's imploring the public to look at the whole picture.
There's so many other things that are very dangerous and bad about this virus.
New modeling forecasts the death toll in the U.S. will exceed 200,000 by November unless more people begin wearing masks in public. In Washington, Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
China is defending the World Health Organization and lashing out at the U.S. decision to withdraw from the UN body. A foreign ministry spokesperson says the move is another demonstration of the U.S. pursuing unilateralism, withdrawing from groups and breaking contracts. President Trump has harshly criticized the WHO over its response to the coronavirus pandemic and accused it of bowing to Chinese influence. Jacksonville, Florida Mayor Lenny Curry is now self-quarantining with his family after learning he came in contact with someone who tested positive for COVID-19. In Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro has also tested positive for the virus. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon N.A. Member FDIC.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants, from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
Influential conversations from
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great?
So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not book an MOT to get you safely back on the road? With over 600,000 carried out every year at 350 garages, you can always count on our experts. And get back to visiting those you've missed the most.
Hi, Mum.
From a safe distance, of course. From MOTs to battery replacements and tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
When you buy tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a robot or to someone called Robert or Derek or Sanjay or Sue or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hi, it's Ali. What are you searching for?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
The rescue package that the president led with bipartisan support in Congress and the PPP that Secretary Mnuchin fostered and implemented, it's the temporary layoffs, John. It's the furloughs that are coming down. We kept people connected to their employers. A lot of temporary layoffs will go back to work.
Larry Kudlow there, the National Economic Council Director, weighing in on the next steps in the United States as fiscal authorities worldwide and their policies come into sharper focus in the month of July. Tom Keenan, your equity market, an hour and 12 minutes away from the opening bell. We advanced just 4, call it 5 points on the S&P 500, up a little more than 1/10%.
Well, there's been a nice move in the market today, certainly a nice rebound off of where we were 2 hours ago. Right now, to drive forward the discussion on stimulus, we have with us a gentleman from the 10th District, North Carolina. Patrick McHenry joins us. He has been steeped in Republican politics going back to George Bush the Younger. He was intimately involved in that successful run for president in 2000. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us today. What is the best outcome for conservative Republicans in this fiscal trajectory of the next 6, 7, and 8 weeks? For those that are frugal and have frugal constituents, what's the best outcome?
Well, I mean, ideological concerns are different when you have a house fire, and what we have is a major house fire here. So we've got to get that righted and then get back on a solid footing here. So for me, I think the approach is how do you get people back in employment in a safe and effective way? So the first piece there is health safety. Without health safety, nothing else matters. So we have to have substantial funds so that we can have a pipeline of treatment options that have been borne out by scientific proof, as well as potentially a vaccine. You get that right, which of course requires a substantial amount of government money with the private sector innovation. And then you get to the question of a rehiring bonus and tax policy that incentivizes businesses to get back in the risk business, to safely reopen, to take the proper risks, and to know that they have a foundation upon which to take that risk. So I think that's really important. So rehiring bonuses would be substantial and helpful, and a tapering down or elimination of these overly generous in major parts of the country federal benefits for unemployment. I think the combination of a bonus for rehiring and tapering down that unemployment benefit would be smart policy.
Congressman, are you getting frustrated by the lack of clarity, the lack of details that you're getting from this administration in the month of July?
Yes. Look, we had a great result with the CARES Act. We saw Pelosi and the House Democrats produce a partisan bill that got no Republican votes. They even lost Democrat votes. It was so far to the left. So that's not a serious point of discussion. What we want to hear is that agenda set so we can have Trump economy too. We just came off of the best economy in most of our lifetimes. And the policy set that we implemented there gave support to what was happening in the private sector and lifted us to new heights. Let's put that agenda out. Let's be bold about it. Let's hear from the White House on the details so that we can go iron out the policy on the Hill. That's really what I want to hear. And it has been frustrating that we haven't had that detail set yet.
Congressman, why are they dragging their feet? What's the reason behind it at the moment from your standpoint? And is it making it difficult in your constituency to talk to your constituents about why there isn't a plan beyond the month of July?
Well, look, it's complicated because everything has changed. Like the best health experts in the world were saying that summer was going to sort of take this thing down like the flu season. And that was just a couple months ago. We had health experts tell us not to wear masks at the beginning of the year. So the idea that you're going to see 2 months or 3 months in the future in this environment is really hard. So I think there's some understanding that we wanted to be hesitant to just lay out a whole broad policy path before we actually understood the confines of this. Now, we're in July. We need to see that clearly from the administration, and we need to see clearly from states and localities about school reopening, because that's a vital economic set as well. If you can't have child care, it's very difficult for you to get back to some semblance of normal economic life.
Congressman, you're talking about a lack of cohesion and a lack of certainty around what the policies, the specific detailed policies are going to be going forward. And yet you're also, you've admonished Fed Chair Jay Powell for perhaps blurring the lines between monetary and fiscal policy. Some argue that because there hasn't been a faster fiscal policy, it has forced the Federal Reserve to act more and in more varieties that go closer to fiscal policy to make up for that gap. What do you say about that? I mean, do you think that you have been too slow and forced the Fed to act more aggressively?
Not yet. If we screw this up in late July and August, I think that will be the case. But I don't see that. What I was reminding when we have the Secretary of the Treasury before my committee and the Chair of the Federal Reserve, I always remind them that there is this wall between monetary policy and fiscal policy, and the Hill should not get into the weeds of monetary policy, nor should the Fed chair direct fiscal policy. And I got to tell you, Jay Powell gets high marks for his fast action and being very foresighted. His foresight is just absolutely amazing in this environment.
Right.
And when they laid out Main Street lending, it took a long time to get that ramped up, but it was a very clear sign to policymakers on the Hill that we've got the lending piece. You guys get in the stimulus piece. You guys get people connected with their employment, and you get people off the unemployment rolls or give them support so they can get back into the economy. And that's something that we hear clearly. So I think they've picked their lane smartly. I think they've stayed in their lane smartly, however, really aggressively. And over the long term, we're going to have these Fed programs pulled back from the economy. But at this stage, we're still trying to put this house fire out.
Congressman, we need to get down to Asheville and do a remote down there. Team surveillance, Asheville, North Carolina. I can see it now. Patrick McHenry, thank you so much. The 10th Congressional District of North Carolina. John, this is so important, and we didn't have time to go into it there, but he is in a district from Asheville over to the east of rural North Carolina, which you just got to say, how is the president and how is Vice President Biden going to do in that district come November?
And Tom, what you got there was just a little bit of a hint, just a little flavor of the division that's slowly emerging. The frustration between Republican congressmen and women at the moment down in Washington, D.C., looking for some leadership on the next fiscal steps and a real lack of clarity on what they might be. And I actually think what he said was smart. Look at tapering the enhanced unemployment benefits, not just letting them expire, and look at incentivizing rehiring. These are the plans we need to see and need to see quickly, Tom.
Yeah, there's no question about that. A tapering idea, John, you're dead on about, but it's going to be interesting to see, again, the overlay of the election into this fractured convention season.
From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Abramowitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
This is a Bloomberg. For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
The big Volkswagen event is now on. If you're after a new Volkswagen, we offer to pay your first 3 months finance payments and an additional £500 to £1,000 contribution to your deposit at 3.8% APR representative. Hello, sir. Do any take your fancy?
Well, yes, a new Golf or T-Cross. A Tiguan. No, Passat. Oh, I need to sit down.
Here, have a seat.
The big Volkswagen event. With every type of car on offer, you may have trouble choosing. With Solutions Personal Contract Plan until 12th of July excludes e-Golf at participating retailers only. Minimum 46 months to receive 3 months finance payments. Indemnities may be required. Volkswagen Finance. Contact your local retailer to book an appointment.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rocked that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide, live on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Abramowitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro. Checking in on your equity market around about 1 hour away from the opening bell. Equity futures up 4 points, up a little more than 0.1%. No drama in the equity market, just really quite choppy overnight after a day of losses yesterday. In the bond market, the shape of things as follows for treasuries. They've been really sticky over the last several weeks. Yields lower yesterday, though, higher this morning by not even 2 basis points to 0.66%. 6% on a US 10-year. And in foreign exchange, as Chancellor Sunak leads the way in the UK, the pound just a little bit firmer, up by a couple of tenths of 1% against the US dollar, as the Chancellor unveils the next steps for fiscal policy in the United Kingdom, and maybe laying down a marker for fiscal authorities elsewhere as well, including the United States. Tom Keene, we're also on bankruptcy watch. I know you are too. We've seen it from Barney's and even Marcus. We've seen it on Dean and DeLuca, and now we got another one.
Well, you see it nationwide. I don't have those statistics in front of me, but the bankruptcies have exploded, John. And this is Brooks Brothers. They've been on Bloomberg surveillance before. They took great pride in making their ties on Long Island. I've got a couple of them that, frankly, were gifted to me. This one wasn't. This tie I bought September 11th of 2001 at Brooks Brothers in Boston. I only wear it once a year on September 11th. And, John, as well, this suit is not Brooks Brothers. It's made by Oxford of Chicago, but it was patterned off a 1950s box suit of Brooks Brothers. That's what they were famous for years ago, a certain kind of boxy suit. And that's what the suit is paid. They're gone. I mean, you can't believe they're going to go away forever, John. But there is Brooks Brothers now in bankruptcy. As you mentioned, John Barney's and Neiman Marcus as well. Someone who's been, John, a great student of this has been Jeremy Siegel. He is really something. He's at Wharton, but far more. He is at Wharton and, yes, doing investor pundency and, of course, working with Larry Kudlow for years at CNBC. But this is Jeremy Siegel, who worked with Robert Shiller years ago at MIT. He's been a great supply-sider, someone looking at the free markets, as his good friend Robert Shiller has maybe gone a different way. We're thrilled the gentleman from Wharton could join us right now. Professor, thank you so much for joining us as well. Bob Shiller talks about finance in a good society. Is this modern capitalism in pandemic? Is it providing for a good society?
Wow. Didn't expect to be hit by that question as number one. Let's put it this way. Fortunately or unfortunately, I think in some ways unfortunately, the pandemic, the shutdowns have shifted advantage to large corporations. The Targets, the Walmarts, those that are able to stay open, to have the inventory, to provide the necessary protections against the mom-and-pop stores, and they're the ones that are suffering. So, we see the market value of holding up extremely well, while if we had a stock market for mom-and-pop stores, it would be down in the sub-basement right now.
Well, Professor Siegel, this is such an important conversation. I give great credit, folks, to Catherine Mann at Citigroup, formerly at OECD, for really driving forward this debate. Professor Siegel, are we becoming too monopsonistic, where literally there's going to be, all of the 1930s, a la Andrew Mellon, we're going to see a consolidation of companies into bigger and bigger and bigger entities?
Well, there has been this shift. And obviously, you're going to see some of the big companies that have the resources buy the smaller companies. I think that is also true. But I think we also know that we can look beyond this crisis to next year, where I think, I think by very early next year, maybe even by the very end of this year, effective vaccines. And so we're it will come back, but it'll come back with a shift towards the bigger companies having advantage. And, perhaps we, as think of public policy, should think about making sure that small businesses get credits to reopen and not cede all ground to those large retailers.
And Professor, you raise a great question, which is essentially how do we preserve the dynamism of an economy beset by a pandemic, which does seem to be accelerating right now. New Jersey's governor, for example, just ordered all New Jerseyans to wear masks outdoors as they try to prevent the outbreak that does seem to be ticking upward in that state. Professor, what is the consequence on productivity, on growth, on the dynamism of the U.S. economy if there isn't some sort of incentive to sort of sway the power back to smaller businesses a bit more?
Well, there's question of productivity is really a very interesting one I've studied. I actually believe that we're going to see a surge of measured productivity, because I believe, and I mean, there's two sides to this coin, but I think a lot of these people that are being laid off are not going to be hired back because corporations are going to say, you know what, hey, I didn't need them. I didn't need to incur these expenses. I mean, look what we're talking about, business travel and business meetings, everything. I can do them free on Zoom or whatever, and still produce the output that I did before. And don't forget, that's one measure of that productivity, output per unit input. That's the classic measure. Now, you're talking also about dynamism and in discovery and invention. Let's hope that does not get impeded. Some of my contacts, in the venture capital world say it's proceeding and money is still available there for innovation. And it is the innovative companies that are still getting plays. So let's hope that stays there. And of course, that connects with immigration. I mean, as a professor, we're very worried about some of the recent ICE rulings about if it's all Zoom, students can't stay here because I think international and globalization is a good thing. I mean, there's a lot of very, very good issues in there. Measured productivity as standard actually may increase over the next several years because of this pandemic.
All right, well, let's bring it down then from the 30,000-foot view of wither our economy to the here and now, which is that people are scared for their futures, they're scared for their jobs, and they're stockpiling cash at a record pace. You believe, and you've been reported as saying, that you think this will lead to a boom in consumer spending. Can you square that with this idea that we are going to see a reduction in corporate spending? We are seeing an increase in the slowdown of the U.S. economy.
Well, I was schooled. My first job actually was as a professor at the University of Chicago, and I was very honored to be a colleague of Professor Milton Friedman, who's won the Nobel Prize on his monetary theory work. And I remember him telling me, he said, Fed expansion is very important, but look at the M1 money supply, which is the supply of bank accounts, of transactions accounts, demand deposits, checking accounts, payroll accounts, and all the rest. And I have seen an explosion like we have not seen in the post-war period. The M1 money supply is up 34% from the first week of March. Now, just to give you a perspective, in the entire year that followed the Lehman crisis, from just before until September of 2010, the money supply was only up 17%, and half of it. And this 34% is just the beginning. As your show shows, we're going to be putting more stimulus back in. I think that it's repressed now because obviously travel isn't taking place, restaurants are crippled, and all the rest. But I'm thinking towards 2021, this money in people's accounts is going to be spent. Not all the people are going to be hired back, of course, because as I say, a lot of companies can say, hey, I can still provide the output without them. But nonetheless, I think we're going to have inflation next year, and I know that's not at all consensus forecast, but in 2021, 2022, with a very, very strong consumer spending.
Professor Siegel, thank you so much. Jeremy Siegel with us, too short a visit from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. I look, John, at all that we're talking about here, and of course, Professor Siegel has been someone who's watched us over the years. And I really want to say, John, that all of this pandemic and all of this crisis, the trillions of dollars of debt we have, it's really going to test the underlying theories that hinge everybody together in economics, finance, and investment. Frankly, John, you saw that in the House of Commons today, where there's a theory and there's action. I'm unsure if you're going to see something as cohesive out of Washington.
Yeah, something I said earlier, Tom, and I'll repeat it again. This is an observation about the present, not a judgment about the future. In the here and now, this bond market is still wide open for fiscal authorities to do more. But at some point, of course, you test the ability of a bond market to absorb that. When it comes to the debt, I think you've got to draw a distinction, Tom, between the debt build-up in the official sector on the central bank balance sheets, where I think there's less of a concern, and the debt that's being built up in the private sector. Big companies have taken on a lot of debt to get through the last several months, Tom, and they're going to have to pare that down. I don't know how quickly, over what time period, but that's going to be a focal point, I think, for the years to come. The debt build up in the last several months and their ability to pare it down.
Well, they're going to see, I've been reading about a couple companies here that are really on a project to do that. And, of course, Dominion Resources, that's what they're going to do with a large part of the proceeds, John, from Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway.
Tom, looking at the equity market this morning, futures just turning just a little bit lower. We're basically unchanged on the S&P 500, going nowhere into the opening bell, around about 50 minutes away. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Brabbitts, I'm Jonathan Ferro, heard on Bloomberg Radio, seen on Bloomberg TV. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Tom. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says he is ordering people to wear masks outdoors in his state during the coronavirus pandemic. When it comes to the outbreak in the South, the chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence is ruling out another lockdown.
We can make sure that America stays open and stays healthy. And I think that one of the things we've learned through this is there's also an enormous health consequence to shutting down the economy, whether or not that's a financial pain or whether or not that's a psychological pain.
Mark Short tells Bloomberg the White House wants another stimulus package by early August, but it also wants to keep the cost below $1 trillion.
I think we want to make sure that that people that are still unemployed or hurting are protected, but at the same time, we want to take into consideration the fact the economy is bouncing back and want to try to contain the amount of spending.
President Trump has launched an all-out effort pressing states and local officials to reopen schools this fall, arguing that some are keeping schools closed not because of the risks from the coronavirus pandemic, but for political reasons. House Democrats are seeking to choke off the Pentagon's authority to move money around after the Trump administration used Defense Department funds to build a southwestern border wall. The House Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, in its draft fiscal 2021 spending bill, proposed reducing the Pentagon's request for transfer authority from $9.5 billion to $1.9 billion with added reporting steps. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. You might not think now is a great time to build a new luxury hotel, especially in a place like Florida right now. But what if you add a residential component and a hospital and design the whole thing so that you can shelter in place during a pandemic with lots of disease-fighting features?
The ventilation systems are going to do the sanitation, UV rays, antimicrobial materials throughout.
Danielle Kotze is CEO of Royal Palm Companies and co-developer of the Legacy Hotel and Residences project planned for Miami World Center. He says other things like voice-activated door locks, robotic sterilization, and even isolation partitions for emergencies are among the features.
In future pandemics, this hotel or the entire complex could remain open and really service, folks that are coming in either to the hotel or residences that want to shelter in place.
And that is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu. Connecting.
Prepare your child for the world ahead with Blundell School, Devon, an independent day and boarding school for 3 to 18-year-olds.
Every day is a different adventure.
Set in 100 idyllic acres amid the rolling hills of Devon, Blundell's can be a crucial part of the equation if you're considering a move to the southwest.
We looked at schools right away across from Salisbury, and Blundell's punches well above its weight. Exeter down the road.
We're proud to offer an outstanding, quality education, less than 2 hours by direct train to central London.
The happy teachers bring the lessons to life.
Blundell's, one of Devon and Cornwall's most prestigious schools for more than 400 years. Rated excellent by the ISI. Learn more at blundels.org.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
I don't think anyone expects the US to try and engineer a break to that peg anytime soon. I think it would have significant blowbacks through the financial system into the US economy right now. But I think it is, in a way, sending a signal to the whole global financial system that the US is serious about ramping up pressure on China.
Those comments from Rupert Harrison of BlackRock following reports here at Bloomberg that officials in the Trump administration are weighing proposals to undermine the Hong Kong dollar peg. Much more on that through the week right here on Bloomberg TV and radio. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Bravitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro. Tom, about to step away to get you up to speed on the Open in Bell as we count you down to the Open on Bloomberg TV. Looking forward to catching up with Tony Rodriguez of Nuveen Asset Management as some signs of fragility start to come to the surface in the rally of the last several months.
Yeah, there's no question about that, John, and it'll be interesting to follow into the Open at 9 o'clock on Bloomberg Television. Of course, we'll be with Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio. Just extraordinary what we're seeing in technology. Right now, without question, our interview of the day, if not our interview of the week, on the social fabric of this nation. It would normally be an interview on trade with a former ambassador on trade with President Obama, Mr. Kirk of Texas, but that's not the case. In these times, we need to talk to Ron Kirk about the Reagan High School in Austin, Texas. We need to talk to him as 57th mayor of Dallas, Texas, and we need to talk to him about the path forward for this nation. Ron Kirk, we're honored to have you with us today. We are seeing images of statues torn down. They're not going to do that in front of the Alamo, but we're seeing images coast to coast of statues being pulled down. How do we resurrect the new statues to come? How do we rebuild this nation with statues that our kids can be proud of?
Well, Tom, first of all, thanks for having me. And we are taking a turn that I didn't expect, but certainly not one that I haven't spoken to quite a bit over the last several months. First of all, Tom, to me, the more important journey isn't about which statutes we replace what with. The bigger journey is what's in our hearts, and are we going to really get to the systemic matters that have allowed for the most parts, the overwhelming majority of blacks and Latinos and poor people in this country to be locked out of the economic system. And while and you mentioned, ironically, I graduated from John H. Reagan High School, another one of those, a school named for another one of those Confederate generals. My concern, if we spend more attention on taking down the names and the statutes, we don't address the systemic problem we have in some of our police communities over the disparate treatment of blacks and poor people. If we don't address those underlying factors that hold people of color black economically, we really will have only just put up a new painting, some.
Well, new order placed for euro. I'm placing an order to buy at 112.79.9. So order placed to buy at 112.79.9. Position open at 112.79.9. That's long position.
Americans who are afraid over our changing demographics, and we're seeing that all across the country. All you've got to do is look at any of your news feeds any day and see one more incident of a black family, an Asian family, a Hispanic family being attacked. There's a boldness there that I don't think people would have demonstrated if they weren't getting now very overt direction from the White House. But the other thing I've told people, we're responsible for that. If you want more civility, if you want political leaders who are willing to find the common ground, stop voting for all of these jerks who go to Washington, refuse to compromise, see one another as enemy combatants, versus all of us who care about and love this country, wanted to live up to our ideals, and are willing to fight passionately for that. So it starts with the power of that vote. And I challenge the American people, vote for the kind of politicians you say in your heart you want to see representing us. But then don't stop there. Examine your own behavior in the workplace and in corporate America and see whether or not we're living up to those ideals.
Ambassador, since this is a business show, I do want to just get a quick question in here. Given the fact that we've got so much emphasis on rejiggering supply chains in the wake of the pandemic, do you think that we do need a different trade policy with this in mind in order to bring medical supply production and other essential services back to the United States?
Well, sure. And I know initially we were going to talk about the visit of President Lopez Obrador from Mexico to the U.S., but this is where trade policy does matter. And while the new NAFTA, the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, is an improvement on it, but it's taking the old car in the garage that your parents gave you, putting a new engine in it, putting new bells and whistles, versus having a new architecture like the Trump administration threw away with the Trans-Pacific Partnership that would allow us to have access to whether it's medical supplies or technology or raw materials that we need to drive our economy. And more importantly, give us free access to these new emerging markets that desperately want to grow using the best of what we make in America. But this pandemic has demonstrated the folly of having a terror policy that ends up compromising our ability to access the very tools we need to fight this horrific disease.
These are many conversations, and we need longer conversations. Ron Kirk, we've got to get you back on again soon. Thank you so much for joining us today. He's the former mayor of Dallas. Lots coming up here. John Farrell is going to drive forward television. We're going to drive forward radio with a market that just refuses to go down. There's no other way to put it. And I'd also point out today the surge that we see in gold as well. Please stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
When you're buying tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a machine or to someone called Mac or Priya or Lewis or Zoe or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hey, it's Ali. Can I give you a hand?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops? Oh, you look lovely in that.
Stop and profit for euro, it's 112.81.9. So stop and profit is 112.81.9.
Again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Ready to talk brass tacks on what's happening in Major League Baseball? Turn to the Effectively Wild podcast from Fangraphs for daily statistics, analysis, and commentary.
One team will say, yeah, we're going to keep paying minor leaguers their stipend, and another team will say, we're going to extend the stipend through this month, and then another team will say, nope, we're cutting them off. So are extending it at least through August, which would basically be the end of the minor league regular season.
Search Effectively Wild on TuneIn to listen.
Next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour, Kenan Thompson. He's the longest-running cast member ever on Saturday Night Live, and it took him years to feel like he belonged.
It just never seemed real for so long. Like, I had such a hard time even associating myself being on the show for a long time. Like, I wouldn't watch, you know what I'm saying, just because I felt like I was ruining it.
Kenan Thompson joins us next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Hi, this is Mike Tirico, introducing you to Sports Uncovered, the newest podcast series from the storytellers at NBC Sports that will shine a fresh light on the most unforgettable moments in sport.
The reason why I'm smiling, I might get in trouble for this.
Search Sports Uncovered to start listening today.
The first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China. So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
There's no other way to say the world economy is in awful shape.
Whether it's a few months or 18 months, eventually it will come to an end. The economy will revive.
Finance.
Many people take the Fed to task. I think the Fed should be applauded.
We only have limited tools. It's up to the fiscal authorities to do something about it.
Investment.
In a couple of years from now, things are going to be back to probably where they were at the very beginning.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Wednesday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. Equity futures are up modestly, and investor survey results, virus metrics, and continued tensions between Washington and Beijing. The U.S. dollar is steady. Treasury yields are up modestly, and WTI crude oil remains steady at about $40 per barrel. And, of course, gold continues its relentless move higher. Let's get under the hood on some of those equity futures. We can do that with Bloomberg Stocks Editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at this morning?
Starting with Facebook, Paul, shares are down about 1% in early trading. Civil rights organizations criticized the social media company after a meeting yesterday with CEO Mark Zuckerberg and Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg. They said Facebook is failing to meet demands to fight misinformation and hate speech. So that will be an issue to watch going forward. Biogen, up 8%. The drug maker filed with U.S. regulators for approval of an Alzheimer's treatment. Now, Biogen revived this drug last October, 7 months after scrapping a trial. Now they're going ahead and looking for U.S. clearance to start selling the treatment. Walgreens Boots Alliance up 2.5%. The pharmacy owner said it plans to open as many as 700 medical clinics at its drugstores in the next 5 years. Walgreens is also investing $1 billion in primary care provider Village MD, which will provide the services in those offices. Walmart's up 1%. The retailer is higher for a second day after a person familiar with the matter said it will introduce a subscription service this month to compete with Amazon Prime. Now, Walmart rose yesterday by 6.8%. That was the stock's biggest gain since March. Kohl's is up 3.5%. The department store chain was raised to buy from neutral Bank of America. The firm said Kohl's is likely to recapture sales faster than its peers as stores reopen. American Express, though, down 0.75%. The charge card and travel company was cut to neutral from buy at Citigroup. The firm cited, quote, reduced T&E. That would be business, travel, and expenses. KKR is up 4%. The private equity firm agreed to buy annuity and life insurance company Global Atlantic Financial for a price that may exceed $4 billion. Allstate, though, down 3% after making a similar deal. They agreed to buy National General Holdings for about $4 billion in cash. The deal will expand the insurer's property and liability operations. And MSC Industrial Direct down 3%. This is a distributor, so they handle a lot of products. They declined to provide financial forecasts after fiscal third quarter results, beat analysts' average estimates in the Bloomberg survey. Alcoa up 5.5%. The aluminum maker said second quarter sales were at least $2.1 billion, surpassing estimates. Technip FMC up 10.5%. The oil services company received a contract to help build an Egyptian refinery. Technip FMC valued that deal at more than $1 billion. And finally, AMC Entertainment up 12.5%. The largest U.S. movie theater owner is near an agreement to head off a bankruptcy filing, according to the Wall Street Journal. The report cited unnamed people familiar with the matter.
Are you going to go back to a theater when we get the all clear sign, Dave?
Well, it would take a very compelling movie to get me there, and I don't go to the theater all that much anyhow. Yep. And with all the options at home, you know, you've got Netflix, you've got Amazon, you've got other services if you want them. I mean, too many choices.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a tough road to hoe for some of those theater operators, unfortunately. Bloomberg Stocks Editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Well, this coronavirus pandemic is a global issue. It is impacting economies around the world, but none so dismally as the United States. That's according to Matt Winkler. Matt is a co-founder of Bloomberg News. He did that all the way back in 1990. He's now the editor-in-chief emeritus. We're going to get him back. He dropped off the line. But he's got an interesting column out today, and I suggest people take a look at it at Bloomberg.com and on the terminal, just kind of talking about the U.S. response to the pandemic, the economic impact in the U.S. versus some other advanced economies. And Tom, it just you look at some of the numbers, and we don't screen that well versus some other economies around the world.
No, we don't, and certainly this is a huge, huge theme right now. I thought John Farrow was brilliant this morning, Paul, looking at how they do it in the United Kingdom. Not that they don't have their own challenges as well, besides too much soccer, but John really pointed out that you win an election there, and then you run the government until there's another election. And their fiscal stimulus today was clear. Yep. Targeted, pointed. John walked through what they're doing for youth, et cetera. And we're here. It's going to be an absolute Donnybrook. Why don't you bring in Mr. Winkler? Mr.
Winkler, co-founder of Bloomberg News, editor-in-chief emeritus. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Just an incredible column you have out today. And that intro paragraph to me just kind of knocked me back. Give us a sense of, your call that the bad economy that we're now dealing with within the context of the pandemic is really President Trump's fault, arguably.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. Thank you very much. It all starts with science more than anything else. And the science told everybody who was listening and paying attention that this was a global pandemic and it was bound to threaten all of us. And the best thing we could do was prepare for it. And the last thing that Donald Trump did was prepare the United States of America for it. In fact, he said, it's insignificant, it'll go away by April, it'll just disappear. And then once it hit the U.S., he resisted all of the things that are prerequisites for containing the virus, whether it's, masks to begin with, which he still has a disdain for, whether it's antibody tests, contact tracing, social distancing, which he has contempt for. Now, why are those things directly responsible for making the economy worse? Well, it created so much uncertainty, so much confusion, and it turned what should have been an issue of science into a political issue. And once it became a political issue, then the economy couldn't possibly take its cues the right way. And so now we have something called chaos, really, reigning. I mean, you've got all these states where the COVID-19 cases are going up, the death rates are going up in so many of them. You wanted to have people be able to travel at this point, and some of them are, but the problem is people who are traveling from these states where it's going up are coming into the states that have done a great job containing it and shut down, like New York and New Jersey. But New Jersey's now got, a risk on because it's got people coming into Newark from all over.
I got to step in here because Matt's been way too modest about this over the year, but he's got a parchment from Kenyon College a few years ago on American history. And, he's a huge student of history. And, Matt, I want to take you back.
I'm moving on. Stop on profit for euro to 112.84.9. Now I'm moving actually on to 112.89.9. Stop on 112.89.9.
It was a very strange election in 2016, one of 5 in which the winner, so-called winner, lost the popular vote. So we've had all these presidential elections, and Donald Trump wasn't elected by the majority of Americans. That's the first thing. The second thing is you had some very strange disruptions, whether it's Comey in the last few weeks, really, intervening with Hillary Clinton and her email server. And you also had the Russians doing everything they could to help create disinformation. So all of those things made it possible for Donald Trump in some ways to be, shall I say, an accidental president. I wouldn't say, he didn't come in on a landslide. He came in with less than the majority of Americans voting for him. So that's the answer, how the know-nothings got in. There are a lot of other things going on, as you well know.
Yeah, but Matt, I want to move it forward, and I can do this because you're now emeritus, which means he's got an opinion. Because Matt Winkler, folks, at least 412 times has preached to me, Tom, we don't have an opinion. Tom, we don't have an opinion. Tom, and on. The bow tie spins, both of ours, when he does that. Matt, I want to talk about what the Democrats have to do to not repeat history. Would you suggest, given all your study, that the Democrats will have to move back almost to a Reaganist middle, away from a more progressive certitude to be sure they win?
I think the Democrats' message has to be, dare I say, about facts. And the facts right now are grim. And the Democrats have to say, they're grim, and we want to change it. And the only way we're going to change it is if we make a change at the top. I think that's their message. This is going to get worse, not better. We can see that. The fact that really at the heart of the labor market, this has taken a toll like nothing we've seen in our lifetimes. And that's going to be staring every voter in the face, even the voters like you and me who are relatively lucky. That we're still working, we're relatively prosperous, we have no complaints. However, we're in a minority, and most Americans are going to be feeling the pain again and again into November. And so the Democrats just have to say, we don't want any more pain. We have to make a change, and that comes with policies.
Well, we got to leave it there, Matt. A provocative essay. Matthew Winkler, our editor-in-chief emeritus, writing for Bloomberg Opinion today. Matt, thank you so much for those candid comments. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Are you applying for PPP loan forgiveness? Don't leave money on the table or fail an SBA review. Visit CohnResnick.com/loan forgiveness. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. The president of the National Education Association slammed President Trump's suggestion that schools should reopen. In a video statement, Lily Eccleston Garza is calling the drive to bring children back to class callous. Garza said reopening schools in the fall without a plan is an unnecessary risk for students and teachers, and suggested President Trump come to her classroom.
I want him to sit there for 7 hours, 5 days a week, and have those kids cough and sneeze on him.
President Trump argues that some are keeping schools closed not because of the risk from the coronavirus, but for political reasons. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy announced that all people in his state are required to wear masks outdoors. Officials at the White House are speaking out on the pandemic. Members of the Trump administration talked to Bloomberg Radio about the outbreak, including response coordinator Deborah Burke. She's praising the governors who mandate masks in their state.
I want to really applaud the governors who've taken decisive action to really mandate masks, increase social distancing, close bars.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thank you so much for that. We appreciate that update. Futures very quiet here on a Wednesday morning. I'm going to call it quiet. The S&P up just under 3 points. The Dow up 10 points. That puts the Dow at 27. Call it 780 on your Dow Jones Industrials. NASDAQ up a little bit more, about 0.3%. That puts it at 10,561 for the NASDAQ. Got a little bit of a bid to those tech names. 10-year Treasury down 4%, pushing that yield up just slightly to 0.65%. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fair housing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Influential
for the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
Ever wondered how people's postcode lottery works? Easy. Your postcode is your ticket. And every weekday it gives you the chance to win £1,000 or £30,000 every weekend. And every month players in your postcode could win a share of £3 million. Join in at postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of July to play in the August draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. And U.S. stock index futures have been fluctuating this morning. European stocks falling amid new tensions between Washington and Beijing and worries that consumer spending will lag during the pandemic. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 4.5 points. Dow futures up 17. NASDAQ futures up 35. The DAX in Germany is down 0.8%. 10-year Treasury down 4/30 seconds. Yield 0.65%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.1% or 4 cents at $40.58 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.7% or $12 to $18.22 an ounce. The euro 1.1297 against the dollar. British pound 1.2550 and the yen 107.53. Brooks Brothers filed for bankruptcy, felled by the pandemic's impact on clothing sales and its own heavy debt load. Watching Alcoa this morning up 6% in early trading. It reported preliminary second quarter results that beat expectations. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. It has changed. If you look at any given newspaper in this country, there used to be 2, 3, 4 articles on the pandemic, obviously a statistical review as well. And now it seems all-encompassing, 10, 12, 14 articles a day as this pandemic touches this nation. We've been very fortunate to speak to the professionals at the Johns Hopkins University Medical System, the Bloomberg School of Public Health. We should point out that Mr. Bloomberg is the owner of Bloomberg LP and these television and radio facilities as well. And he has endowed Johns Hopkins and their many different institutions, including their engineering department, I should point out. Today we speak with Lauren Sauer of the Johns Hopkins University.
I think the problem is that there's a difference between no evidence and evidence that there's not airborne transmission. And what we are seeing is that we don't have enough evidence to conclusively say airborne transmission is a major driver. We know that aerosols have some element of driving cases, especially in the healthcare setting. And what that letter, I think, was trying to say is that these aerosols may be a bigger driver than what we originally understood. And so while we are not seeing widespread airborne transmission like in some other viruses, there is a possibility that aerosol is driving more cases than we currently understand.
Lauren, if the virus lingers in the air indoors, it changes everything from school reopenings to bars and restaurants indoors reopening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the place where we worry the most about these aerosols is a crowded indoor setting with bad ventilation. It's why people are saying that they prefer you to be outside if you're going to congregate, that you want more outdoor space, you want better ventilation, you want better airflow, you want to be further apart. And the movement of the air really helps with getting those aerosols out.
You know, Lauren, not that I would ever think you would darken the door of Mary Jane's at Boston University. I'm sure you didn't do that your freshman year up at BU, but the kids have to go back to school. Give us some wisdom here of the intractable nature of this from kindergarten up to freshman year at Boston University. How do we get the kids back to school?
Yeah. So just yesterday, I think Secretary Azar said that since we don't see as many cases of spread in healthcare settings, we can apply those practices to school and get kids back. And I think it's just not that easy. I think we need a much more local approach to how we reopen schools. What do the cases look like? What does the spread look like in a local community? And do we continue to apply these out-of-school measures to continue to educate people? Do we keep doing online, or in places where there is not much spread and we have cases controlled and we can use things like contact tracing, can we put kids and adults back in the classroom? So I think it requires a really local approach.
Yeah, but Lauren, this takes resources. And this is an ancient United States thing. For our global audience, the issue of states' rights versus federal rights on education is a third rail across the United States history, well over 200 years. How does Johns Hopkins believe that we should fund the needed funds now that will be utilized in all of 8 weeks?
Education funds have to be an absolute priority, and I think penalizing places because they reopen schools in a different way or because they can't physically reopen the doors to their schools is a crime, and we have to prioritize, especially the children who really, they have to be back in the classroom, and we have to look for ways in which we can do that safely. So everyone wants.
I'm moving stop on profit for euro to 112.94.9. So a new stop on profit for euro at 112.94.9.
Multiple comorbidities or other vulnerable teachers have to have an assessment done with their physician, with their personal physician. They have to take into account their personal risk and their familial risk, and then they have to make a decision about what's safe for them. And again, they should not be penalized because they cannot safely re-enter a setting where we don't really understand what the risks are yet. So because we don't fully understand the picture of COVID in kids, we can't say to a teacher who's older or higher risk, you're safe, you're fine, go back to school. We have to find other ways that those people can support the educational system, even if it means making curriculum online, making resources for other teachers who can be back in the classroom. There are ways to continue to engage teachers who cannot safely be back in the classroom.
Lauren, when will we understand better, how this is transmitted through children? In the UK, many schools, if not almost all schools, reopened for certain classes, and there was a belief that actually it's just much more difficult for a smaller child, to transmit it to another small child. I mean, when are we sure that that's the case, if it is?
I think we'll see that this year as schools do reopen. We have to be very careful to to understand what's happening in kids. So that means testing kids even when they're asymptomatic. It means taking kids to doctor's appointments. It means paying careful attention to mild symptoms in kids and getting kids their flu shots in particular and other vaccines on schedule in particular so that we understand this is COVID versus something else, and getting kids tested when they show even the mildest cases of symptoms. That's how we'll really understand what's happening and what those transmission dynamics look like.
Lauren Sauer, the Johns Hopkins University, with us this morning. Paul Sweeney, I'm looking at a market that's lifted. It was very red early in the New York morning, and we're now futures up 8, Dow futures up 41, NASDAQ 100. Paul, what is it, a new mandate? It can't go down?
Exactly.
Is that the basic idea? 0.4%?
It's I think that's that Federal Reserve backstop that's out there that I think gives investors on the margin, an ability to bid for stocks and bid for risky assets when maybe the economic data suggests a little bit more caution.
Yields move a little bit higher. We had curve flattening earlier. That's reversed. Is now a risk-on field. No question about that. 2-10 spread. That measurement of the yield between the 10-year and the 2-year. The difference in yield, I should say, between the 10-year and the 2-year. 49 basis points. It was different earlier. And, of course, dollar dynamics as well this morning. Gold taking a real rush to $1,800 the ounce this morning. Stay with us. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene worldwide. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason the companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, they've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rocked that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not book an MOT to get you safely back on the road? With over 600,000 carried out every year at 350 garages, you can always count on our experts. And get back to visiting those you've missed the most.
Hi, Mom.
From a safe distance, of course. From MOTs to battery replacements and tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
And good morning. I'm Karen Moscow, along with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney. And the opening bell is brought to you by SEI. Crisis, bring out the best in people, character, community, partnership, together as one. SEI. Go to SEIC.com/IMS. And the S&P 500 is higher at the open, up 0.3% or 9 points at 3155. Dow Jones Industrial Average up 0.25% or 62 points at 25,953. And the Nasdaq's up 0.6% or 63 points at 10,407. 10-year Treasury down 6/32, yield 0.65%. The yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil is little change, down 1 cent to $40.61 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.7% or $12.80 at $18.2280 an ounce. The euro 1.1308 against the dollar. The yen 107.55. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney, it'll be interesting to see if, as many pundits are telling us, a dampening of the VIX, even if the VIX goes up, even as the market goes up, right, the VIX will come down ever more than the typical proportional move. 28.95 in the VIX. That's a real change from 2 weeks ago, isn't it?
It really is, but I question, Tom, how much lower it can go, because there is a lot of angst out there in the marketplace as people, get that economic data point after data point. It seems like every day suggesting that there should be a greater caution.
Dow up 40 points, Nasdaq 100 up 0.6% as well. Damien Sassower joins us now with Bloomberg Intelligence. Thrilled that he could be with us, because Damien, just percolating in the heat of July are pretty intense discussions of troubled EM fiscal authorities over what they're going to do into the autumn. Which countries are you focused on?
Well, there's no question. You're going to see trouble in...
Moving further, my stop on profit for euro to 189, 112, 99.9. So 112, 99.9.
Current levels.
So you mentioned China, but how much confidence do you and other emerging market participants have in some of the data that we see coming out of the Chinese government?
Yeah, fundamentals don't matter until they do, Paul. And certainly when you're talking about data coming out of China, a lot of that has to be taken tongue-in-cheek. But, most emerging market economies, China included, must contend with their deteriorating fiscal balances, slower growth, and, of course, now falling real yields, which reduces their ammunition to really combat, the crisis and get the economies moving in the right direction. So, you've seen sovereign downgrades accelerate, most notably India of late. Moody's downgraded them to just one notch above junk. And India is a candidate to be added to a lot of global bond indices, and so, similar to the way China is being integrated to the Bloomberg Barclays and the JP Morgan bond indices, you're going to see India be added at some point. And look, all of these things are definitely something you need to take note of as we move into the second half.
Damien, I am the king of seguis, and right now we're going to segui from Damien Sassower into the esteemed Austin Goolsbee. And the way we're going to do this, Damien, is I want you to tell me where the fault lines are, as the IMF is the third pillar of all of EM. And this, of course, goes to my book of the summer last year from Raghuram Rajan of the University of Chicago, obviously former head of the Indian Central Bank. And it's such an important book, Damien. For the first time ever, I rebrought it out as a book of the summer for this year as well. So I get the IMF as the third pillar, the World Bank and that, but the fault lines to Raghu's wonderful book of years ago, where's the major fault line right now in EM?
The fault line is, simply put, it's local debt markets, right? It's the ability to build depth in local economies, local capital markets, so that they can fund themselves in their own activities. This is the fault line, Tom. And so what happens when you have the IMF basically, providing dollar loans or hard currency loans to frontier economies, the idea is that eventually these economies are going to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, and many of them cannot, right? Yeah. And it's the speed at which we get to that point. So for me, where's the fault lines right now? It's going to be in economies like, for example, Egypt, right? Which is just it's not quite a frontier. It's in between a major and an EM and a frontier economy. But what you need to do is you need to see those local debt markets develop to the point where you don't just have, offshore investors renting in the front end of the curve. You have to create real term premium, push them further out along the curve so they can really put capital to work in their economies and get them moving smoothly. That is the fault line in my mind.
Right. Damien, that was awesome. Go away.
Yeah, exactly. We've had enough of him.
Damien Sassower, just fabulous. And that's the segue into Austin Goolsbee of the University of Chicago. That was pretty good how I did that, Austin, how I got Raghu.
Yeah, you did, and you didn't even know Raghu Rajan and I are teaching a class together right now on policy in an uncertain world.
We're going to rip up the script right now because, folks, this is serious stuff. The third pillar was my book of the summer last year. It's on Community, a primal screen by Professor Rajan about how we have to change how we adapt at a macro basis and also at the micro basis of the community. And Austin Goolsbee is one of the few guys I know that actually practices this within his academics, as he did with President Obama. Austin, you're in the room with Raghu, and you're talking to third pillar. How's America doing? The answer is not very well right now.
Yeah, it's a tough moment. We're in the Zoom room. We don't we're still socially distanced from one another. But look, I don't quite know how we got to where we are on the economy. Not just the health side, but on the economy, because even though there's no vaccine, you've got most of the advanced countries of the world have got it fairly contained. They've got a handle on it. They can start coming back. And there are only a few exceptions. The U.S. is one, and Sweden's another, where they kind of let the virus get out of control in the name of helping their economy. But actually, you see it actually hurt their economy. The economies in the U.S. and Sweden are going to have a hard time coming back if we don't contain the virus.
Austin, it's interesting, Tom.
Paul, please go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Tom. Earlier we had Matt Winkler on Austin. He's the founder of Bloomberg News, and he has a wonderful column out this morning. And Tom and I were speaking with him, and he just kind of pointed out something that you were just saying, which is the U.S. has really done a poor job relative to a lot of other countries around the world when you look at some of the data. What do you think the solution is from here? Because it doesn't appear to be a federal effort to combat this virus and the economic impact.
Yeah, look, that's the problem. The optimistic thing is if we don't dawdle forever, we're not that far from getting on the road that everybody else is on. But if there's not going to be a big federal push, which I agree with you, it seems like there's not, then I think it's going to move back to the states, and you're going to find this weird differential where you got a few states where they're just going to basically ignore the evidence or the experience of other places. And those, in not very short order, those economies are going to start to suffer again. And then in places where they're being judicious, they can get out of this. And the thing is, if you look at these countries in Europe, in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, it's not just that they're getting out of lockdown. Their kids are going back to school. Yep. They in Norway, they're back in the gyms, and they say they haven't had any cases of transmission in the gyms because they've got a handle on the spread of the virus. The thing is, look, everybody knows we want to get out of this withdrawn period, and we're all going stir crazy. But if you do it too early, you set yourself back to square zero. If you don't like being mostly in your house, don't you go get everybody to go to a bar, because you're going to have to go. Everybody's going to have to go back into their house.
So, I mean, I guess this kind of goes back, and it's something Tom and I have been talking about before, states' rights versus, the heavy hand of the federal government here. Where do we go from here? I mean, is this simply states having to come to Jesus type of moment where they get where maybe New York and New Jersey were several months ago?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. As I always say, the virus is the boss. And I got this research that I did with Chad Severson, where we got a lot of data on people's consumer activity from their phones. We have it from the businesses' perspective. So how many people, customers, walk through the door at 2.3 million different businesses around the country? And in that data, it shows very clearly it's not policy that determines economic activity. So if you go to cities like the Quad Cities on the border of Illinois and Iowa, where there's a shelter-in-place order in Illinois and there's no shelter-in-place order in Iowa, you would think that everybody be going to get their hair cut in Iowa and not in Illinois, and so it would show that the policy makes a big difference. Only it's not true. People stop getting their hair cut on both sides of that border. Even though they're allowed to go to the barber, they don't, because they're afraid. And that idea that effectively what's happening is people are trying to feel safe. And until we get a handle on the virus, people are not going to feel safe. And so it moves it back. Every state has got to get control of the spread of the virus. Yeah. And if you do that, the economy wants to come back. It's just that if you go pull out the stops and get the virus spreading again, the economy is going to tank again, because people are going to say, whoa, wait a minute, I don't want to go out there and get sick.
Awesome. We've got to leave it there. Austin Goolsbee, thank you so much for the Booth School of Chicago. Greatly, greatly appreciated this morning. A headline out, the president says he, quote, disagrees with CDC's school reopening guidelines. That is certainly an upfront debate, Paul, here. All right, now let's do this. Let's run to the news with our news in New York City. Here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy has ordered all people in his state to wear a mask when outdoors during the coronavirus pandemic. Federal health officials concede mixed messaging early on contributed to many Americans' reluctance to wear a face covering. Bloomberg's Martin DeCarroll reports.
Back on April 1st, Surgeon General Jerome Adams said people who are around someone who's COVID positive should wear a mask.
But do not recommend that the general public wears masks as a protective mechanism.
Just one of many confusing statements in the early days of the pandemic before federal health officials eventually agreed everyone should wear masks in public. Here's Dr. Anthony Fauci.
That was detrimental in getting the message across right now.
I'm moving up my euro stop on profit to 113.09.9. So 113.09.9, new stop on profit.
A bigger time, harder time dealing with the virus. WHO is running some of the biggest clinical trials in the world. We won't have a seat at the table. It's really harmful to Americans as well as to global public health.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Lift to the market. Dow up 110 points, 26,000 exact. S&P 500 up 18.3163. The VIX comes in a full stick, 1 point in, 28.33. Worldwide, this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuit look at luxury. Thailand's plan to target high-spending foreigners to kickstart its travel sector has a green light. The Southeast Asian nation lifted its near-total ban on foreign travelers July 1st, mostly allowing in foreigners with direct ties to Thailand, either business or family. Although a special arrangement dispensation widens the market for big spenders as the country pivots to focusing on wealthy visitors with private jets. Meanwhile, Bulgari Chief Executive Officer Jean-Christophe Babin said he expects the LVMH-owned jeweler to recover most of the sales it lost due to the COVID-19 pandemic over 2 years. Consumer recovery in China and South Korea has been, quote, beyond belief. In the Bloomberg TV interview, the CEO also said he's sticking to a plan to expand Bulgari's line of luxury hotels with further openings, including the first in the U.S. to be announced soon. LVMH's revenue from watches and jewelry suffered a 26% drop in the first quarter. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband, Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up-to-date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Global News.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. equities are climbing as the biggest tech companies continue to rack up gains, overshadowing new tensions between Washington and Beijing and the uncertain outlook for economic recovery. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is up 0.7% or 21 points at 3166. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 0.6% or 155 points at 26,045. Nasdaq's up 1% or 102 points to 10,447. 10-year Treasury down 7/30 seconds, yield 0.66%. The yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil up 0.25% or 11 cents at $40.73 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.9% or $15.60 at $18.2560 an ounce. The euro 1.1331 against the dollar. The yen 107.47. Biogen is among the best performers in the S&P 500 today. The company said it has submitted an application seeking U.S. approval for its investigational Alzheimer's disease disease therapy, which could become one of the first medicines of its kind to be made available to treat the memory-wasting disease. Biogen shares of 5.8%. And NVIDIA has surpassed Intel in market value for the first time after shares of the graphics chipmaker soared this year. Those shares gaining around 71% this year. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Karen. Greatly appreciate that this morning. This is a joy to get us up to date on the fact there's no yield, there's no real yield, there's no nominal yield. We're yield-free. Ira Jersey joins us, head of fixed income for Bloomberg Intelligence.
You have to pay for yield, Tom. Come on.
Exactly.
It's negative 77 basis points.
And remember when Apple did like a 10-year tranche or whatever in Switzerland in Swiss francs, and it came out with like a 0.001 yield as well. Ira, if we didn't have all this foolishness, if we didn't have the tragedy of this pandemic, the massive stimulus, Jerome Powell, all the rest of it, where would the yield be right now? If we didn't have the oddities of your world, what would the 10-year yield be?
Well, I mean, the big counterfactual is presumably, before the COVID crisis really began, we were starting to slip a little bit, but we were on the verge at the time of a wage push inflation where you saw wages across the board, and particularly for lower income people, was starting to really climb dramatically. And that had the possibility of pushing yields higher, like, not necessarily to 5% on the 10-year yield, but certainly back up toward 3%, where we hadn't been for a couple of years. Yeah. So, we were really starting to be in a good place with the economy doing well. Of course, that's the counterfactual, and the fact is that we have a very weak economy. We're likely to have a weak economy for some time, and that's the reason why you see those real yields as negative as they are, is just the expectation that growth is not coming back anytime soon.
So what is the yield curve telling us right now, Ira? I mean, because we were just kind of talking about this morning about how the U.S., is really not dealing well with this pandemic from a policy perspective, from a medical policy perspective, and the impact that that's having on the economy. Is when you look at it, the yield curve, is it just saying, even as you look out to 2021, there's no real upside, or what are you seeing there?
Yeah, so basically the yield curve is telling you what the Federal Reserve wants it to tell you, which is that the Fed is not going to hike before 2022 and likely into 2023. And in fact, when you look at forward rates, so you look at some of the rates markets like the overnight index swap, which estimates where the Fed funds rate's going to be in the future, you look at that and it suggests that you're not going to get a hike before the second half of 2023. And then even after that, we're only going to get two in a year. So basically the curve is telling you that the economy's slow, monetary policy is going to be easy for an exceptionally long period of time. But that does create some risk, Paul, because the risk is that the economy accelerates at some point in the next year, say, and the long end of the curve, so 10-year bonds, 20-year bonds, and 30-year bonds, could wind up seeing significantly higher yields if the economy recovers faster than what is currently being anticipated by most economists and market watchers.
How are the auctions going? I got full disclosure, folks. This is a rule of mine a million years ago. I never pay attention to auctions. In Ira Jersey's world, everybody gets all lathered up about it, Paul. Yep. And I'm like, okay, the auction went. 2 hours later, it's like, so what? Okay, how are they going now? But with all the minutia of those auctions, is there raging demand for U.S. paper?
I wouldn't say raging demand, but it's been steady demand. Because remember, the auctions, Tom, are larger, right? So we have massive deficits, right? $3 trillion in deficits this year. So, the auction sizes are getting larger and larger, but demand has, for the most part, kept up with that. You did have a little bit of weakness in some of the auctions in June when we thought, the pandemic's over, before it was obvious that there was this potential second wave going on, or you could argue first wave in certain states in the country. But yesterday's 3-year auction, for example, went pretty well. So because people just are willing to park money in U.S. Treasuries at 20 basis points for 3 years and be happy with that, which is crazy to think, but it's true.
No.
And, you know, in the future, you know, today we have a 10-year auction. I suspect that will probably go okay, but I think, you know, some people might be unwilling to, you know, lock in their money at 66 basis points for 10 years.
Ira, we got to throw you off air because it's fixed income and it's boring. I've got to talk the stock market with Paul Sweeney. Ira Jersey, head of fixed income for Bloomberg Intelligence. I can't say enough, folks, about the minutia his team goes into. Absolutely outstanding on short-term paper there a number of months ago. Paul, we're up 200 points, 26,085.
Yep.
The VIX is in a stick. S&P 500 up 23. The NASDAQ 100 having another slow day, up 1%.
Yep.
The rest are up 0.8%. I mean, you know, it come on, this is trees to the sky. I mean, every day we just sort of, it's another day.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it seems like once every week or two we'll get a bad virus metric day and the market will pull back a couple of percent, but other than that, it's kind of moving up grudgingly, you know, grinding higher. And again, I guess what we hear, Tom, from a lot of the smart people that you and I talk to, this kind of Fed backstop to the market here with so much liquidity in the marketplace. And as Ira mentioned, people are willing to park, you know, money in U.S. Treasuries for, you know, infinitesimal yields. And it just kind of goes to show kind of people are just looking for places to put their money in the U.S. stock market with that Fed backstop is as good as any.
Yeah, I'll let the pundits, Mike Regan and the experts that we have, talk about this today. But to me, the market lift this morning was when the Chancellor of the Exchequer started announcing the details of his stimulus, which John Farrow said was really quite substantial. We leave you with a Dow up 200 points. David Wilson along with good comments on individual stocks through the day. The VIX 28.27. We are produced often by Richard Truman. Please stay with us through the day. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Say that you are mine. I'll be here till the end. Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
If you want to find out what the best smart tech is to keep an eye on your front door whilst you're out on your lunchtime run, you could ask an algorithm, or someone called Al, or Miguel, or Haley, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience.
Hi, it's Ali. Do you need some help finding the right tech?
Isn't it nice to get advice from another human being? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that. Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Indoor gatherings, wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Don't share food, toys, or other items, and avoid shared surfaces. Open windows for better ventilation. Try to avoid gathering indoors as much as possible. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
The Fed action, essentially unlimited quantitative easing.
Companies taking aim at coronavirus vaccines and other treatments.
This could be a lower for longer hit.
Market sell-off glowing global once again.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
It's possible that this is going to be a scarring recession.
The Fed is really showing that they're doing whatever it takes.
A lot of people don't expect that the economy will reopen in full.
This is really hitting industrial America, and it's a major crisis.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Wednesday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. Coming up, we're going to chat with Clive Gilmore, CEO and Group CIO at Mondrian Investment Partners, get his thoughts on international markets. Plus, Brooks Brothers files for bankruptcy. This one hits close to home for me. We're going to dig into the details on that one. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Stocks are up. They've climbed to the biggest tech companies continue to rack up gains, overshadowing new tensions between Washington and Beijing and the uncertain outlook for an economic recovery. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P's up 0.75%, up 23. The Dow is up 0.7%, up 182, and the Nasdaq is up 1.1%, up 114. The 10-year is down 8/32 with a yield of 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 0.4% at $40.78 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.7% at $18.2210 per ounce. The dollar-yen 107.51. The euro $1.1328, and the British pound $1.2583. As you just heard, Brooks Brothers has filed for bankruptcy, felled by the pandemic's impact on clothing sales and its own heavy debt load. The 2-century-old apparel company is the latest to succumb as a nationwide lockdown during the coronavirus outbreak added to the woes affecting old-line retailers like Neiman Marcus, J. Crew, and John Varvatos Enterprises. Each have filed for bankruptcy since the virus took hold. Brooks Brothers is personal for many. My father had his officers' uniforms made at Brooks Brothers during World War II, as many others did. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Bloomberg Markets continues with Paul and Vonnie.
All right, Greg Jarrett, thank you so much.
And, great color there from Greg Jarrett.
Exactly. Thanks
I
for
love that.
allowing that image to seep into our heads for this morning. I do want to bring you some headlines out of the Supreme Court. We are awaiting some decisions this week. Well, it's come out with a decision shielding religious schools from bias suits. So that was one of the few that were left. Trump taxes and, of course, the Deutsche Bank case also on the docket for the rest of this week. But again, the U.S. Supreme Court giving religious organizations a broader exemption from discrimination suits. It basically threw out bias claims filed by teachers who had been fired from their jobs at 2 Roman Catholic grade schools in California, and it was a 7-2 decision. Now, we broke our winning streak, but we're right back on it after one day of losses. Dave Wilson is watching the markets for us. Dave, what's happening?
Yeah, it doesn't take much for things to swing from day to day, especially when you consider that next week is really the start of second quarter earnings season, so there's a lot of marking time going on here. In terms of what's leading the way today, it's an old standby in terms of technology stocks, and you had NVIDIA surpass Intel in the first few minutes of trading to become the biggest U.S. chip maker by market value. The two are kind of going back and forth at this point. If nothing else, it kind of highlights, how, NVIDIA, they're all about graphics chips and, higher powered sort of semiconductors, and they've really been able to steal a march on Intel as everything's been getting more sort of intense in terms of processing capability and so on. So that's one thing that jumps out of today's trading. But beyond tech, energy and financial stocks leading the way, and they've been relatively weak lately. The last couple of years, really. So we're seeing a bit of a bounce back in those groups in today's trading. But, who knows if it lasts at this point, especially given what's going on, with earnings coming up and the anticipation that, S&P 500 profit's going to be down something like 44-45%. So, there's a lot to get through over the next few weeks.
There actually is some non-coronavirus news out there moving stocks. I'm just looking at Biogen, and when I think about biotech stocks, the first ticker I always enter is Biogen to see kind of how it's doing and its peers are doing. And obviously, it's just, when you look at those biotech stocks, Dave, it's just kind of a real crapshoot on these new drugs and where they are in various tests. And I guess Biogen got some good news today about an Alzheimer's therapy, and that stock's up 6% today.
Right. They filed to get U.S. clearance for it. And this drug in particular, it's called aducanumab, is really kind of a story unto itself. Last year, Biogen scrapped trials, then figured out, well, the drug really does work, and then put it back on to try and get approval. So,
you don't see that
they had
often.
that reversal,
Yep.
and now you're moving to the next step, which is actually looking to sell the treatment. So you can understand why Biogen's up at this point. Can I just mention, Paul, one other group that's notable today, home builders. You saw a record low 30-year mortgage rate, 3.26%. And so I guess people are getting a bit excited about the builders. D.R. Horton, Lennar, Pulte Group, all up more than 4%, and among the best performers on the day in the S&P 500.
It's interesting, HSBC among banks with operations in China that are suffering today, this because there are reports that Trump advisors are proposing a move to destabilize Hong Kong's currency peg. How serious is this? How close are we to actually doing that, Dave?
I don't have a lot of insight into Trump administration policy. I will tell you, though, this peg has been around for decades, the idea of sort of fixing the value of the Hong Kong dollar to the U.S. dollar. So, there have been times before, going all the way back to the 1990s when, the future of that peg has been in doubt. Clearly, the passing of the security law that basically gives the Chinese government a bit more control over Hong Kong is getting people's attention. Now, what that means ultimately for the currency markets, becomes an issue because the banks are pretty much lined up. HSBC and its peers operating internationally have, gotten behind the law. So, we'll have to see what kind of sway the U.S. can have when it comes to affecting the value of the Hong Kong currency.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of uncertainty in that part of the world. Dave, so, one of the things that we keep hearing about a little bit is another round of fiscal stimulus, but I don't really see the market kind of hanging on every word about another $1 trillion of fiscal stimulus. How do you think the market's thinking about that?
Well, it may just be that, people are figuring something is going to happen. Because let's face it, you've got these expanded unemployment benefits that end this month, at least based on the current law. So, it's a matter of what the government is going to do down the line. And you have some anticipation that they're going to respond. And, whether it'll be enough in the end, who knows. But at the same time, it's not like people are kind of anticipating that nothing's going to happen. I mean, we've seen this sort of brinksmanship over the years when it comes to things like the debt ceiling and, reaching agreement on a budget. So, it's sort of familiar territory in that regard.
Plenty of analyst action today as well, Dave. How much of a bellwether is Caterpillar anymore? It's been raised to neutral because the outlook is a lot better.
Well, when you talk about raising a stock to neutral, it doesn't necessarily get you all that far to begin with. Caterpillar shares are up about 1%, but every little bit helps. What may be more interesting in that regard, if you're focusing on the industrial economy, Vonnie, is what's going on with MSC Industrial Direct. They're a distributor, so they're involved with a lot of products. They compete with the likes of Fastenal and W.W. Grainger, and their numbers, even though they were great for the fiscal third quarter, not providing forecasts, and the shares are down. So, you have to wonder what that means in terms of people's comfort level with companies not telling you at this point what they see going forward, even when the business is looking good. MSC, ticker MSM, is down more than 5% at the moment.
Yeah, looking at that, MSC Industrial Direct. Dave Wilson, thank you. Always bringing something a little new to the table. And as we can see, the indices are higher today. Will it hold? We shall see. But a healthy gain, particularly for the Nasdaq. Once again, it is the tech stocks rallying most. The Nasdaq up 1.1% now. The S&P and Dow both up 0.75%. Plenty of, micro stories that are positive out there. Macro stories, though, still slightly negative, to say the least. Now, let's get some world and national news headlines.